Hey guys, tonight we are going to explore one of life's simplest, most wonderful pleasures. A cold treat on a hot day. Picture it for a moment. It's the end of a long, sweltering afternoon. The air is thick and heavy, the sun has been relentless, and all you can think about is the sweet relief of ice cream. A sorbet or even just a glass filled with clinking ice cubes. You wander to your freezer, open the door, and are greeted by a gust of frosty manufactured air. It's so simple, so immediate. But tonight, we're going to strip away that modern convenience. We're going to journey back thousands of years, to a time when a single scoop of flavored ice was a luxury so profound, so outrageously expensive, that it was reserved for the gods on earth, the emperors. The logistics, the danger, the sheer human effort required to create this simple pleasure without a plug socket is a story that defies belief. And frankly, if you were tasked with fetching the ice for one of these ancient rulers, you probably wouldn't survive the experience. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly helps the channel grow. And for a bit of fun, post your location and what time it is where you are in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gentle whir of the fan begins to deepen. The air it moves feels warmer, heavier, scented with dust and dry earth. The soft glow from your screen fades, replaced by the brilliant, unforgiving glare of a sun that beats down from a flawless blue sky. You are standing in the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. The heat is a physical presence. It shimmers above the baked mud brick walls of the city of Mari, on the banks of the Euphrates, nearly 4,000 years ago. Around you, the drone of a thriving ancient metropolis is a constant hum, but the silence of the heat, the sheer oppressive weight of it, overpowers everything else. Your throat is dry. You can feel a trickle of sweat tracing a path down your spine. The idea of a cool drink is not just a pleasant thought. It's a desperate, all-consuming fantasy. But here in the year 1780 BCE, that fantasy is an impossibility for all but one man, your king, Zimri Lim, and he has just requested a chilled cup of wine. This is not a problem you can solve by heading to the nearest well. The water from the well is lukewarm, tasting of earth and clay. The river flows tepid and brown. No, the king desires cold, the kind of cold that bites. The kind of cold that only comes from one source, a mountain that is hundreds of miles away, across a landscape that would kill a person foolish enough to cross it in the summer sun. The solution, therefore, had to be born in the opposite season, in the biting winds and harsh frosts of winter. Months earlier, you would have been part of a very different expedition. You are traveling north, away from the flat, fertile plains, towards the snow-capped peaks of the Zagros Mountains. The air grows thin and sharp. The winter here is as brutal as the summer is scorching. Your task is to harvest the ice from frozen mountain streams and collect the deep, compacted snow from shaded ravines. This is not a gentle, picturesque task. You are cutting heavy blocks of ice with rudimentary bronze tools, your hands raw and numb. You're packing it onto donkeys, wrapping it in thick layers of straw and animal hides, a desperate attempt to insulate it for the long journey home. Every moment you are racing against the inevitable thaw. Now back in the sweltering heat of Mari, you stand before the result of that winter labor. It's a structure known as a bit shuripim, an ice house. It doesn't look like much from the outside. It's a low conical mound of earth and baked brick, with a single heavily insulated door facing away from the sun. It looks more like a tomb than a treasure chest. But what it holds is more valuable than gold. You and a few other trusted servants unseal the door. It's a heavy, clumsy thing made of wood and reeds packed with clay to create a seal. As you pull it open, a miracle happens. A wave of intensely cold, damp air washes over you, raising goosebumps on your arms. It's a shock to the system, a scent of winter in the heart of summer. You step inside, your eyes adjusting to the gloom. You are in a deep, circular pit, dug far down into the earth to escape the surface heat. The walls are thick, layered mud brick, maybe a meter or more in thickness. And lining the entire pit from top to bottom are layers upon layers of straw and chaff. It's the best insulation ancient technology can provide, and there in the center is the prize. It's smaller than it was when you packed it in the winter, of course. A good portion has melted, but a massive solid core of ice remains, glistening in the faint light that filters in from the doorway. At the bottom of the pit, a clever clay channel funnels the precious meltwater away, keeping the remaining ice from sitting in a pool of its own destruction. That drain is the secret ingredient, the breakthrough that makes this all possible. Without it, you'd just have a very cold mud puddle. Historians still argue whether the monumental effort behind these ice houses was purely for the hedonistic pleasure of the king's chilled beverages, or if they served a more practical, albeit still elite, purpose, like preserving rare delicacies. You see evidence of both. In one corner there are clay jars of fine date wine, nestled against the ice. In another, a small sealed chest might contain exotic fruits brought by traders from far-off lands, but you know the primary purpose. You know it every time you see the king's satisfaction as he sips his cooled wine, a tangible display of his power. To command winter to appear in his cup during summer is to be more than a man. It is to be a king who bends the very seasons to his will. It's the ultimate status symbol. Forget a fancy chariot. Your boss can literally drink a mountain. A servant carefully chips off a few shards of the precious ice, placing them into a finely crafted ceramic bowl. They are rushed to the palace kitchens where they will be rinsed and placed in the king's goblet. Your job is done for now. You reseal the heavy door, trapping the winter cold back inside its earthen prison. As you walk back out into the blistering sunlight, the heat feels even more intense than before, but you have succeeded. The king is happy. And for a simple servant in ancient Mesopotamia, that's all that matters. You've witnessed the very dawn of frozen luxury, an act of sheer will and ingenuity against the forces of nature. The image of that small subterranean ice pit in Mari begins to fade, its damp, earthy smell dissolving into the dry air. Your perspective drifts, lifting up from the banks of the Euphrates, floating eastward across the vast, arid plains. More than 1,000 years spool by beneath you like thread from a loom. The empires change, the languages shift, the gods are given new names, but the sun remains the same. It is still the great antagonist in this story, the relentless golden eye in the sky. Your goal, too, remains the same, to find the cold, to capture it, to savor it. But the ambition has grown. The scale of the endeavor has magnified beyond what King Zimri-Lim could have ever imagined. You find yourself on the high, dry plateau of ancient Persia, around 400 BCE. The air here is thinner, the landscape more stark. Jagged mountains claw at the horizon, their distant peaks shimmering in the heat. You are walking along a dusty trade route, the silence broken only by the crunch of your footsteps and the whisper of a hot wind. Then you see it. At first it's just a strange shape on the horizon, something that doesn't belong. It's too smooth, too geometric to be a natural hill. As you draw closer, its form becomes clear. It is a colossal cone, a tapering dome of reddish-brown clay rising from the desert floor, looking for all the world like a beehive built for a giant. It stands easily 18 meters tall, a silent, solitary monument against the endless sky. You have arrived at a yakchal. The name in Persian simply means ice pit, but that is a description of profound modesty. This is no mere pit. This is a cathedral of cold. This structure represents a quantum leap in technology. The Mesopotamians had mastered storage. The Persians, in their brilliance, were perfecting creation. Some of these yakchals were still used to store ice harvested from the mountains, but the most ingenious among them could actually make ice right here in the blistering heat of the desert. You walk around its base, running a hand over the surprisingly smooth, hard surface. You're touching a special type of mortar unique to this region, a substance called sarouj. The recipe sounds like something a witch might conjure up, a mix of sand, clay, egg whites, lime, goat hair, and ash. You have to imagine the imperial chef reminding his apprentice, "No, the other bowl of egg whites for the wall plaster." This bizarre concoction created a building material that was not only incredibly strong and a superb insulator, but was also completely waterproof. You can see the intelligence in every aspect of its design. The dome itself is a passive cooling engine. Its conical shape means that only a small portion of its surface receives the direct, brutal rays of the midday sun. The thick, heat-resistant walls, sometimes 2 meters thick at the base, absorb the day's heat so slowly that it barely penetrates to the interior before the cold night arrives to suck it away again. At the very peak of the dome, you can just make out a small opening. This is a chimney, not for smoke but for heat itself. Throughout the day, any warm air that finds its way inside naturally rises, collecting at the top of the dome, and escaping, while the heavier, colder air sinks down into the vast storage space below. To understand how the ice is made, you must wait for the sun to set. As darkness falls on the desert, the temperature plummets with astonishing speed. The clear, dry air doesn't hold the day's warmth, and the heat radiates away into the blackness of space. A team of workers emerges. They open a sluice gate connected to a qanat, one of Persia's other engineering marvels. These are vast underground aqueducts, dug by hand for miles, which bring cool, fresh water from the mountain aquifers right to the desert floor. A shallow rectangular pool runs along the north side of the Yakchal, the side that is always in shadow. The workers channel a thin layer of water from the qanat into this pool, and then they wait. The magic begins. As the night deepens and the temperature drops below freezing, the water begins to chill. But it's not just the ambient temperature at work. The Yakchal is designed to amplify the cold. The high walls create a zone of still air, preventing warmer breezes from interfering, while the structure itself helps to pull heat away from the water. This is where the real genius and a point of friendly academic disagreement comes in. Historians still argue whether the ice was formed purely by the passive freezing on cold winter nights, or if the system actively encouraged evaporative cooling on a massive scale to speed up the process. As water evaporates, it takes heat with it, dramatically chilling what's left behind. It is the same principle that makes you feel cold when you step out of a swimming pool. The Persians had observed this, and it's likely they built the Yakchal to maximize this effect, turning a simple law of physics into an ice machine. Each night, another thin layer of water is added, freezing on top of the one before, creating a block of pure, clear ice. Once the ice is thick enough, it is cut into large blocks and hauled inside the Yakchal, down a sloped entrance into the massive subterranean storage pit. You follow them in. The drop in temperature is instantaneous and profound. You can see your breath plume in the dark. The air is perfectly still. You look up at the soaring dome above you, and when a fellow worker whispers a command, the sound seems to travel in a strange circular path around the walls. The acoustics are an accidental byproduct of the shape, but they add to the sense of being in a sacred, silent space. The storage area is enormous, capable of holding thousands of cubic meters of ice, a frozen reservoir to last through the entire searing summer. This vast supply means that ice is no longer exclusively for the king. It is still a luxury, to be sure, but a commodity that can be sold to the wealthy citizens of the nearby towns. You can now see street vendors selling falude, an ancient and cherished Persian dessert. It's a sorbet made from the Yakchal's ice mixed with rosewater, sugar, and thin vermicelli noodles made from starch. It is sweet, fragrant, and shockingly cold. It is civilization in a cup. As you stand back and look at the Yakchal, you realize it is more than just a clever building. It is a symbol of a society that has learned not just to endure the desert, but to conquer it with intelligence, patience, and a deep understanding of the natural world. The image of the magnificent Persian Yakchal, that triumph of passive engineering, begins to recede. It is a monument to what is possible when the climate, the resources, and the knowledge all align in perfect harmony. But such harmony is rare. For most of the ancient world, for thousands of years, the dream of a cold drink could not be solved with clever architecture alone. If you lived in a place without the uniquely dry air and cold nights of the Persian plateau, you had only one option. You couldn't build a machine to create the cold. You had to go find it. You had to venture into the harshest, most unforgiving environments imaginable and steal it from nature. The warm, dry air of the desert floor gives way to a biting, razor-sharp wind that carries the scent of pine and stone. Your sandals are gone. replaced by thick, clumsy boots of hardened leather. The thin tunic is lost beneath a heavy wool cloak that does little to keep out the penetrating chill. You are now standing high in the mountains, perhaps the Taurus range in what is now Turkey, or the Apennines that form the spine of Italy. It is the dead of winter. The world has been bled of all color, reduced to a stark palette of charcoal gray rock and blindingly white snow. The moon is a sliver of bone in a black sky, and the stars are like chips of ice scattered on dark velvet. It is breathtakingly beautiful and lethally cold. You are not here for the view. You are part of a team, a grim-faced assembly of men huddled together for warmth, our breath misting and freezing in the air. Who are these people exactly? It's a question of some debate. Historians still argue whether these treacherous expeditions were carried out by enslaved people, forced into the mountains under threat of the lash, or if they were conscripted soldiers given the most thankless of duties. Perhaps you are even a specialist, a paid seasonal laborer, a man of the mountains who knows the secret paths and understands the moods of the weather. Looking at the hard, weathered faces around you, it's impossible to know for sure. The only certainty is that your life is considered expendable, but your cargo is not. Your equipment is rudimentary at best. There are no Gore-Tex jackets or thermal gloves here. Your cloak smells of damp wool and wood smoke. To gain purchase on the icy slopes, you've wrapped your boots in thick strips of rough spun cloth, held in place with leather cords. It's a primitive crampon, a desperate attempt to keep your footing where one slip could mean a bone-shattering fall into a dark ravine. It's probably not going to be featured in the next mountaineering catalog, let's just say that. You carry a heavy bronze axe over your shoulder, its metal so cold it feels like it might burn your skin. Other men carry long, two-handed saws, heavy mallets, and iron wedges. Behind you, a line of sure-footed mules patiently bears the most critical equipment of all, huge bundles of dry straw for insulation. The ascent begins. You move in single file, following a path that is barely visible, a winding goat track across the face of the mountain. The work is done at night for a simple, crucial reason. It is colder. The darkness is your shield against the melting power of the sun. The overseer, a silhouette against the snow, drives you onward with sharp commands. There is no idle chatter. The only sounds are the rhythmic crunch of your footsteps, the occasional dislodged pebble skittering into the abyss, and the ever-present moan of the wind as it scours the peaks. The cold is a living thing, a predator that gnaws at your exposed cheeks and finds its way through every layer of your clothing to settle deep in your bones. After hours of climbing, you arrive. It's a high-altitude lake, frozen solid, its surface swept clean of snow by the relentless wind. In the faint moonlight, the ice has a deep, blue-black luster, like polished obsidian. This is the quarry. The torchbearers get to work driving their flaming brands into the snowbanks around the lake, casting a flickering, chaotic light on the scene. The real labor begins now. The sharp, percussive crack of axes striking ice echoes across the frozen landscape. You join the line, swinging your axe in a steady rhythm, your muscles screaming in protest against the cold. The work is grueling, dangerous, and mind-numbingly repetitive. Chips of ice fly through the air like shards of glass, and you shield your face with a raised arm. You've seen men lose an eye this way. Elsewhere on the lake, teams are using the long saws to cut more uniform blocks, the teeth grating with a sound that sets your teeth on edge. Others use the mallets and wedges to split the massive chunks into more manageable sizes. Finally, the blocks are ready. They are carefully loaded into the panniers on the mules' backs, a delicate balancing act. An unbalanced load could be fatal for the animal on the treacherous path down. You and the others then take the straw you painstakingly carried all this way and pack it tightly around the blocks, creating a thick, insulating nest. It seems absurd to carry something so light and mundane into the heart of the mountains, but without it, this entire enterprise is for nothing. The descent is, if anything, more perilous. You are now guiding a heavily laden, nervous animal down a slippery, narrow track in the dark. You are tired, your body aches, and the cold has dulled your senses. But you cannot lose focus, not for a second. With every step downward, you are racing against an invisible enemy: warmth. You are moving from the realm of permanent frost toward the warmer air of the lowlands. The clock is ticking. Every moment that passes, a small part of your priceless cargo weeps away into the straw, a tiny defeat. As the first pale gray light of dawn touches the eastern horizon, you reach the rendezvous point at the base of the mountain. Your job, the brute force part of the equation, is over. Here, the ice will be transferred to a new team, but your relief is muted by exhaustion. You are just one link in a very long and arduous chain. You look back at the immense dark peaks now silhouetted against the rising sun. You have ventured into the domain of winter, battled it on its own terms, and emerged with a frozen piece of it. All for a king you will never meet, for a luxury you will never taste. The hulking figures of the mountain harvesters recede into the gray pre-dawn light, their monumental task complete. They can rest, their bodies aching, their hands raw. But for the ice itself, the most perilous part of its journey is just beginning. It has been conquered and captured, but it has not yet been tamed. It is a creature of the cold, and you are now tasked with dragging it through the fire. The slow, grinding toil of the mountainside is over. Now begins the frantic, desperate race against the sun. You are waiting at the base camp as the final mule train arrives. You are not like the men from the high peaks. They are thick-set, powerful, built for endurance and brute strength. You are lean, almost skeletal, your muscles like coiled ropes beneath sun-darkened skin. You are built for one thing and one thing only: to run. The air is already losing its nighttime chill. A hint of the oppressive heat to come hangs in the atmosphere. There is an urgent, controlled chaos in the camp. The large blocks of ice are quickly broken down with sharp picks into smaller, more portable chunks. These are swiftly packed into insulated containers, maybe round wicker baskets lined with a thick layer of waterproof clay, or heavy leather satchels. Fresh, dry straw, which was stored here for this very purpose, is stuffed in to fill every gap. Who are you, this specialized human courier? Historians still argue whether you are part of a dedicated corps of professional runners, athletes maintained by the state for their unique stamina, or if you are simply the fittest and most unfortunate soldier from a nearby garrison, selected for a duty that will push your body to its absolute limit. Your personal feelings on the matter are irrelevant. You have a job to do. While the ice is being packed, you make your own preparations. You eat a dense, heavy cake made of ground barley, honey, and mashed dates. It's a lump of pure fuel, an ancient energy bar that sits like a stone in your stomach. It's not delicious, but it will keep you going. You drink deeply from a water skin, hydrating your body for the ordeal to come. There won't be time for a leisurely drink on the road. A leather-wrapped bundle is hoisted onto your back and secured with straps that dig into your shoulders. It's heavy, perhaps 15 to 20 kilograms, and the cold from it is a dull, shocking ache, a bizarre contrast to the warming air. The overseer gives you a sharp, impatient look. There are no grand speeches, no words of encouragement. There is only a nod, and you are off. Your sandals slap against the packed earth of the road leading away from the mountains, towards the distant capital. The first few minutes are about finding a rhythm, settling your breathing, letting your legs find the familiar, loping stride you can maintain for miles. The sun crests the horizon, and its rays are like a physical touch, promising the furnace that is to come. You are a moving target, and the sun is the archer. Every single ray is an arrow designed to pierce your insulation and steal a little more of your precious cargo. Your own body heat is an enemy. The sweat that begins to bead on your forehead and trickle down your back is a sign of your exertion, an exertion that generates warmth, a warmth that is trying to destroy the very thing you carry. The miles dissolve beneath your feet. The terrain changes from rocky foothills to dusty plains. You run past sleepy villages where dogs bark from the shade and farmers, already at work in their fields, look up and watch you pass with a mixture of pity and awe. You are a familiar sight, the Emperor's ice runner, a fleeting specter of imperial will. Your lungs burn, your thighs are on fire. The straps of the pack chafe your skin raw, but you don't slow down. You can't. You have a sense, a gut feeling, for how the ice is faring on your back. You can feel the slow, subtle shift in weight as it melts, the slight increase in the dampness that seeps through the leather. It's a constant, terrifying reminder that you are failing, little by little, with every step you take. Your job isn't to deliver ice, it's to deliver what's left of it. You aren't expected to run the entire distance yourself. That would be impossible. The Empire, in its brutal wisdom, has devised a system. After an hour of running at a punishing pace, you see a landmark on the horizon, a gnarled old tree, a pile of stones. This is the relay point. Standing there in the shade of the tree is your replacement. He is bouncing on the balls of his feet, fresh and ready. He looks at you and you see your own exhaustion reflected in his eyes. There is no time for pleasantries. You stagger to a halt, your body screaming in protest. With fumbling, clumsy fingers, you unbuckle the harness and swing the heavy pack from your shoulders. He takes it from you, his fresh strength a stark contrast to your own fatigue. You might gasp out a warning. Wash out near the river bend. Before you collapse to your knees, chest heaving, vision swimming, he doesn't reply. He is already gone, a puff of dust down the road, his pace just as frantic as yours was. It's the most stressful baton pass in the ancient world, where dropping the baton means it melts. As your breathing returns to normal, you watch the dust settle. You have done your part. You will walk back to your own station, or perhaps to the main camp, and you will do this all over again tomorrow and the day after. The human cost of this single luxury is immense. You are just one of a dozen runners in this chain, a living engine of sinew and bone fueled by grain cakes and fear, all to transport a substance whose only purpose is to vanish. It is the ultimate embodiment of fleeting, conspicuous consumption. The ice arrives at the palace gates not on a gilded cart, but on the back of a man just like you, dusty, drenched in sweat, staggering with exhaustion. The guards take the bundle from him, and it vanishes into the cool depths of the palace. The runner receives no thanks, no reward. He has simply done his duty. He has outrun the sun for one more day. The dust settles on the road behind the vanished relay runner. His frantic, metabolic burn is a testament to a stable, wealthy empire with fixed points on a map. A palace here, a mountain there. But what happens when the seat of power is not a palace, but a moving tent? What happens when the demand for ice belongs to a king who is constantly on the march, conquering the world? The intricate supply chain of runners and way stations collapses, and in its place, something more rugged, more adaptable, and born of military necessity must arise. We rewind the clock slightly to the 4th century BCE. The air grows thick, not just with heat, but with the metallic tang of sweat and the smell of oiled leather. You are no longer a specialized courier. You are a soldier, a spearman in the Macedonian army, one of the thousands who have followed the brilliant, charismatic, and terrifyingly ambitious Alexander the Great across the known world. You are camped in the dusty plains of Bactria, what is now modern Afghanistan. The sun is a merciless hammer, your bronze helmet an oven, your woolen tunic a scratchy torment. You march, you fight, you train, and you sweat. Life is a grueling routine of discipline and survival, but today your commander has issued a strange order. Your unit is not drilling or sharpening your sarissas. You have been given shovels and you are told to dig. You're at the base of a towering mountain range, whose peaks still stubbornly cling to a cap of white snow, a taunting reminder of a cold that feels a world away. Under the watchful eye of an army engineer, you begin to excavate a series of deep rectangular pits in the hard, dry ground. The work is exhausting, the purpose a complete mystery. You exchange weary, cynical glances with your comrades. It feels like classic military logic. When in doubt, have the men dig a hole. When they're done, maybe have them fill it back in. It keeps them busy, if nothing else. As you dig, you see another detachment returning from the slopes of the mountain above. They are laden not with loot or supplies, but with rough burlap sacks and wicker baskets overflowing with snow. This is not the clean, careful harvest of the professionals you glimpsed before. This is a clumsy, hurried affair. Soldiers have scooped up handfuls of wet, slushy snow, stuffing it into any container they could find. They dump their cargo near the pits, a growing pile of melting white in the ochre-colored dust. Now the engineer's plan becomes clear. You are ordered to shovel the snow into the pits you just dug. You fill them to the brim, periodically jumping in to tamp the snow down with your boots, compacting it into a dense, solid mass. The sensation is bizarre and deeply unpleasant. The sun beats down on your neck and back, making you sweat profusely from the labor, while your feet, immersed in the snow, are aching and numb with a biting cold. It's a strange personal war of the seasons happening inside your own body. Once a pit is packed solid with snow, the final step begins. You are sent to the sparse woodlands on the lower slopes to cut down oak branches. You bring them back and lay them over the top of the snow pit, weaving them into a thick, dense mat of leaves and wood. This leafy canopy will be the insulator, shielding the snow from the sun's direct rays and trapping a layer of cold air. Finally, you shovel the excavated earth back over the top of the branches, creating a low, camouflaged mound. You have created a disposable, field-expedient ice house. You have to wonder, where did a Macedonian general get an idea like this? It seems too clever, too refined for a blunt military man. Historians still argue whether this was a stroke of Alexander's own genius adapting a traditional Macedonian practice for preserving food, or if more likely it was a technology he swiftly appropriated from the Persians he was in the process of conquering. Alexander was not just a conqueror of land, he was a conqueror of ideas, a master of seeing a good trick and immediately making it his own. For weeks the snow pits sit there, forgotten mounds of earth. You march, you fight a brutal battle against a local satrap, you see men fall, you return to the camp exhausted, blood-spattered, and grim. Morale is low. But that evening a special ration is announced. The snow pits are opened. You watch as a servant digs through the branches and pulls out a chunk of compacted crystalline snow. Much of it has melted, but a solid core remains. Clay amphorae of rough Greek wine are lowered into the icy slush to chill. Later you sit with your comrades around a campfire, and a cup of cooled wine is pressed into your hands. The shock of the cold, the crisp taste, is a moment of pure, unadulterated pleasure. It's a luxury so profound, so out of place here in the dirt and blood of a campaign, that it feels like a miracle. It's a message from Alexander himself. Even here in the wastelands of the empire, I can bend nature to my will and provide for you. The effect on morale is electric. But you soon notice the snow has other uses. A field medic, his hands stained with blood, takes a handful of the clean snow from the center of the block. He wraps it tightly in a strip of linen and presses it against the swollen, purpled thigh of a man who took a blow from a cavalry mace. It is a primitive cold compress, but it will help. Another soldier, shivering with a fever despite the evening's heat, is given a similar cloth to place on his forehead. The relief on his face is immediate and obvious. This isn't just about a chilled drink for the officers. It's battlefield medicine. It's a small, ingenious piece of logistics that helps preserve the army's fighting strength. The snow pits are a weapon, as subtle but as effective as any siege engine. You have helped build a temporary tactical tool of empire, one that cools both the wine and the fevers of Alexander's relentless army. The gritty reality of Alexander's battlefield snow pits dissolves. The image of the weary soldier, finding a moment of practical relief in the cold, fades into the dust of history. We leave behind the world of tactical necessity and journey forward now. Several hundred years into the future and across the sea to the west, the goal is still the same, to command the cold. But the motive has been stripped of all practicality. We are entering an arena of pure, unadulterated hedonism, a world where a frozen treat is not a tool of morale for an army, but a jewel in the crown of an emperor's decadence. You are no longer a soldier on the march. You are a guest at a private banquet, but this is no ordinary dinner party. You are reclining on a plush couch in the Domus Aurea, the legendary Golden House of Rome in the year 60 CE. The air is warm and heavy, thick with the scent of roasted peacock, spiced wine, and the thousands of exotic flowers that festoon the vast dining hall. The walls around you are not canvas or mud brick, but polished marble, adorned with breathtaking frescoes that seem to shimmer in the flickering light of 100 oil lamps. Soft music from a distant lyre provides a gentle soundtrack to the low murmur of conversation from the other guests. All senators and aristocrats dressed in fine, snow-white linen. Your host, of course, is the emperor himself, Nero. He reclines at the head of the room, a young man with a laurel wreath on his head, laughing at a joke made by the poet Lucan. Forget the stories you've heard of the tyrant, the madman. Tonight, he is simply the host, and his sole ambition is to overwhelm you with a display of wealth so profound it borders on the divine. The main courses of the feast have been cleared away by a retinue of silent, graceful slaves. A hush of anticipation falls over the room. You know that the finale of a Neronian banquet is always a spectacle. A procession of servants enters the hall. They move with practiced solemnity, each bearing a single heavy tray of polished silver. On each tray rests a crystal bowl, so clear it seems to be carved from solid light. And inside each bowl is a mound of pristine, dazzlingly white snow. It's so pure, so brilliant against the colors of the hall, that it seems to radiate its own cold light. In the oppressive summer heat of Rome, it looks like an impossible mirage. You know, this isn't ice made from the water of the Aqua Marcia aqueduct, the water that slakes the thirst of the million people in the city below. That would be far too common for Nero. No, this is a statement of purity. The Romans of the elite class, as the writer Pliny the Elder often complained, had become obsessed with the provenance of their water. They believed that snow, having fallen from the heavens, was the purest form of water, untainted by the earth. This snow was harvested by teams of laborers, just like the ones we've seen before, from the highest, most inaccessible peaks of the Apennine Mountains, which form the spine of Italy. It was then rushed to Rome via the same kind of punishing relay system, a chain of human suffering, all for this one moment. A servant approaches your couch, bowing low. He carries a small tray with several smaller bowls of jade and agate. These contain the flavorings. He offers you a choice with a deferential gesture. There is a thick, dark syrup made from crushed wild berries, a golden honey infused with thyme, and a sweet, fragrant juice pressed from sun-ripened peaches. You choose the honey. With a delicate silver ladle, he drizzles the golden liquid over the mound of white snow. The contrast is exquisite. You take your first spoonful. The cold is a physical shock, a delightful violence against the warmth of the evening. It numbs your tongue for a second before the pure, sweet flavor of the mountain honey blossoms in your mouth. It is an incredibly simple pleasure, the kind of thing a child might enjoy. And yet sitting here you understand that it is the absolute zenith of luxury. The cost and effort embodied in this single melting bowl is staggering. It represents a line of command stretching hundreds of miles, from the emperor's whim to the shivering man on the mountain peak. It is power made edible. You look over at Nero, who is delicately eating his own snow, theatrically savoring each spoonful. You can't help but wonder about the stories. Are they all true? The chronicles of his reign, filled with tales of shocking indulgence and cruelty, were mostly written by historians like Suetonius and Tacitus, men who wrote decades after his death. Historians still argue whether their accounts were journalism or political assassination by pen, crafted to legitimize the new dynasties that followed Nero by painting him as a monster. Are you witnessing a typical evening in his court, or are you part of a scene that will be exaggerated and embellished for centuries to come? Perhaps the truth doesn't matter as much as the perception. Whether this level of decadence was a nightly affair or a rare spectacle, the message it sent was the same. It was a demonstration of reach, of logistics, of a power so absolute that it could casually defy the seasons for a moment's pleasure. It told every guest in that room that the Roman Empire's grasp was so long, it could pluck winter from a mountaintop and serve it for dessert. The Roman road, the Roman galley, the Roman legion. All of these instruments of power were ultimately in service of this, of fulfilling the emperor's slightest desire. The snow in your bowl is melting quickly now, turning into a sweet, cold puddle at the bottom. It is the perfect metaphor for the scene around you. All this effort, this wealth, this power, focused on creating a sensation that lasts for only a minute before vanishing forever. It is the ultimate disposable luxury, and in its fleeting nature, it is the ultimate expression of Neronian Rome. The sweet cold puddle at the bottom of Nero's crystal bowl is the end of a very long story. It is the final, vanishing whisper of a colossal effort. Let's leave the perfumed air of the Golden House, the sound of the lyre fading behind us, and trace that story backward. Let's follow that single drop of water from its luxurious end back to its violent, frozen beginning. Our journey starts deep in the earth, in the unseen foundations of the palace itself. You descend a flight of cool stone steps into a subterranean cellar, a Roman conserva nivis. This is no simple dirt pit. Roman engineering, the same that masters arches and aqueducts, is on display even here. The chamber is lined with perfectly cut stone. The ceiling is a vaulted arch designed to bear the weight of the palace above, and the floor is sloped towards a sophisticated drain, whisking away any meltwater. The air is still, silent, and shockingly cold. Against the walls are massive chests, crudely made of wood but lined with thick layers of straw, cork, and wool. It is here that the daily deliveries of mountain snow are stored, the imperial reserve of cold, ready to be summoned at a moment's notice for a fevered brow or a whimsical dessert. Emerging from the palace cellars back into the blinding Roman sun, you see the machinery of distribution in motion. A small, fast-moving cart, pulled by a pair of swift mules, is rattling away from a service entrance. Its cargo is a small, heavily insulated chest. You follow it through the chaotic, noisy streets of Rome. It doesn't head for the public markets. Instead, it pulls up to the gate of a sprawling private villa, the home of a fantastically wealthy senator. This delivery is for him. Nero might have a monopoly on power, but he does not have a complete monopoly on its luxuries. And this reveals a fascinating, complex commercial world. Who organized this delivery? Was it a favor from the emperor? Unlikely. This is business. You are witnessing the work of the Navarii Negotiationes, the snow merchants of Rome. This wasn't just a handful of rugged mountain folk. It was a lucrative, highly organized trade. Historians still argue whether the emperor's needs were met by a dedicated state-run service that also sold its surplus, or if a fully privatized market flourished, with private companies bidding for the imperial contract. You can almost imagine the cutthroat competition, rival merchants praising the unique virtues of their product. Forget that gritty Apennine slush, a salesman might say. My snow is from the pristine peak of Mount Etna itself, shipped in insulated galleys. It has a superior flavor, a celestial purity. It's a bit like the modern obsession with bottled water from a specific Fijian spring, a level of connoisseurship that is both absurd and a massive moneymaker. To understand how this business can even exist, you must leave the city behind. You find yourself on one of the great arteries of the empire, the Via Flaminia, the road heading north from Rome. This is the true secret to the ice trade. The road is a marvel of engineering, paved with large fitted stones running almost perfectly straight for miles, cutting through hills and bridging valleys. It is this infrastructure that makes speed possible. Every 10 miles or so you pass a way station, a mutatio. Here, teams of men and animals are kept in constant readiness. You watch as a light wagon, its cargo bay clearly insulated, thunders into the station. Before the dust has even settled, a team of workers swarms it. They don't change the animals. They swap the entire cart. The insulated chests of snow are rapidly transferred to a fresh wagon with a rested team of horses, and it is on its way again in minutes. This is the cursus publicus, the imperial post service. Primarily designed for official mail and magistrates, its incredible efficiency was the perfect engine for transporting high-value, perishable goods. It was the ancient world's version of a same-day courier service, a logistical network of immense speed and precision. Sometimes the cargo comes from even farther afield. You stand at the bustling port of Ostia, at the mouth of the Tiber River. A swift bireme, a light warship, has just docked. Its usual cargo of marines or dispatches has been replaced by a dozen large, heavily guarded chests. These have come from Sicily, carrying the prized snow of Mount Etna. The journey by sea is faster than the long road from the south of Italy. The chests are offloaded with the same frantic urgency and placed onto the waiting carts for the final 20-mile dash to the capital. Your reverse journey is almost complete. Following the road, the relay of carts, you eventually find yourself back in the chilly air of the high mountains. You see the weary, hardened faces of the harvesters, their crude tools, their shivering mules. You see them packing the snow with straw, the very first link in this immense chain, but now you see it differently. It's not just an act of backbreaking labor. It's the start of a sophisticated industrial process. That bowl of flavored snow you witnessed in Nero's palace was not just a symbol of his personal power. It was a symbol of the power of the entire Roman system. Its roads, its ships, its bureaucracy, its commerce. The ability to move something so fragile and fleeting across a sun-scorched empire was the ultimate proof of their mastery over the world. The vast, intricate machine of the Roman ice trade hums with ruthless efficiency. The roads, the ships, the relays, all are a testament to a society that can achieve any logistical feat it sets its mind to. But while the engineers, merchants, and laborers were busy perfecting the how of delivering cold, a very different group of people were asking a more fundamental question. Should we? We leave the dusty roads and bustling ports and enter the quiet, contemplative world of the Roman physician and philosopher, where the value of a thing was measured not in sesterces, but in its effect on the human body and soul. You are sitting in a sun-dappled peristyle, an open courtyard in a wealthy Roman house. The frantic noise of the city is muted here, replaced by the gentle splash of a fountain and the rustling of grape leaves on a trellis overhead. You are a student, here to listen to a lecture from a renowned Greek physician. He is an old man, his mind as sharp as his bronze medical instruments. He is not interested in commerce or status. He is interested in balance. He begins by speaking of the foundational theory of all medicine, the wisdom passed down from the great Hippocrates of Kos centuries earlier. The human body, he explains, is governed by 4 humors: blood, which is hot and wet; phlegm, which is cold and wet; yellow bile, which is hot and dry; and black bile, which is cold and dry. A healthy person, he tells you, is a person in whom these 4 humors are in perfect harmonious balance. All sickness, from a mild cough to a deadly fever, is the result of an imbalance, an excess or a deficiency of one of these vital fluids. The duty of a physician is not to fight a disease, but to help the body restore its own natural equilibrium. Now he leans forward, his voice lowering with gravity. He turns to the subject of the day, the growing fashion for chilled drinks and snow-eaten desserts. He describes the stomach as the body's furnace, the cauldron where food is cooked and broken down to provide nourishment. This process requires an intense internal heat. So I ask you, he says, his eyes scanning the faces of his students, what happens when a man on a hot day pours a cup of ice-cold wine into this furnace? What happens when he consumes a bowl of mountain snow? He pauses for effect. He extinguishes the fire. The result, he argues, is a catastrophe for the body. The digestive process is halted. The food in the stomach putrefies instead of cooks, creating an excess of the cold, wet humor, phlegm. This leads to a host of ailments: painful colic, debilitating cramps, shivering fits, and a general weakening of the entire system. It is, in his view, an act of self-inflicted violence, a shocking disregard for the body's natural harmony. He even questions the much-vaunted purity of the snow. When it melts, he claims, the water stagnates, becoming heavy and impure. The common man drinking fresh, flowing water from the aqueduct is, in his opinion, far healthier than the rich man drinking corrupted snowmelt. His lecture then shifts from the purely medical to the moral. He picks up a scroll and reads a passage from the Stoic philosopher Seneca the Younger, a man who was once Nero's own tutor. Seneca saw this craving for cold as a symptom of a deeper sickness, not of the body, but of society. He called it a form of slavery to luxury, a moral failing. Your teacher reads Seneca's scathing words which condemn those who are not satisfied with water from a well, who must have their drinks chilled by sweating runners, whose palates have grown so jaded that only the shock of unnatural cold can please them. For Seneca, a man who could not endure the natural heat of summer was a man of weak character. A society obsessed with such trifles was a society that had lost its virtue, grown soft, and was teetering on the edge of decline. It's a timeless rant, the ancient equivalent of complaining that your society is doomed because people are spending too much money on frivolous luxuries. Of course, the argument wasn't entirely one-sided. A fellow student raises a hand and asks about the use of cold to treat a fever. The physician concedes the point. In a case where the body is suffering from an excess of heat, a raging fever, the careful application of cold either as a drink or a compress could indeed be a useful tool to help restore balance. This, you recall, was how Alexander's army used it. But that is the point. The teacher insists. It is a medicine, a targeted intervention for a state of disease. It is not, and should never be, a casual refreshment, a daily indulgence. After the lecture, you walk out into the city once more. The physician's words are still ringing in your ears, but as you walk through the forum, you pass a tavern with a sign advertising chilled Falernian wine, a crowd of patrons eagerly gathered around it. The senator's delivery cart rattles past you on its way to his villa. It's clear that while this debate was raging in the intellectual circles of Rome, the general public, at least the wealthy public, was not listening. And so, you are left with a fascinating question. Historians still argue whether these passionate medical and moral critiques had any real impact on Roman society's consumption of iced treats. Were the writings of Seneca and the warnings of the Hippocratic doctors just the grumblings of a few grumpy intellectuals, completely ignored by a populace in the thrall of a delightful new luxury? The sheer scale of the ice trade suggests that pleasure, as it so often does, won the argument. The immediate sensual delight of a cold drink on a hot day was a far more powerful force than the abstract fear of an imbalanced humor or a weakened national character. The Romans heard the warnings, nodded thoughtfully, and then ordered another round. The intellectual hum of the Roman doctor's courtyard fades away. The clatter of the ice merchant's cart on the paved Roman road grows fainter and fainter, until it is gone. The great, interconnected world you have been exploring, a world of roads and relays and robust debate, begins to fray at the edges. The threads of commerce and command that held it all together are snapping, one by one. The sun still beats down, the desire for cold is still a primal human instinct, but the ability to satisfy it, an ability that had been refined for over 2,000 years, is about to be lost in a storm of history. The centuries spool forward, dark and chaotic. You are no longer in the heart of a bustling, confident empire. You find yourself in the heart of what was once Roman Gaul, around the year 800 CE. The world has shrunk. The very landscape speaks of decay and fragmentation. You are traveling on what was once a Roman road. The masterfully laid stones are now cracked and broken, heaved up by tree roots. Weeds grow in thick clumps down its center. It is no longer a highway for commerce, but a dangerous track, haunted by bandits and memories. The great aqueducts that once fed the cities with clean water are crumbling, their arches collapsing into the fields they once strode over. The cities themselves have shrunk, huddled behind thick stone walls for protection. You are a monk, living in a remote stone monastery, or perhaps a servant in the smoky, timber-framed hall of a local Frankish lord. It is a hot summer afternoon. The air in the hall is thick with the smell of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and roasting meat. The lord calls for a drink, and you bring him a cup of cloudy, lukewarm ale. He drinks it without a second thought. You drink the same. It does the job of quenching your thirst, but it offers no relief from the oppressive heat. The very concept of a chilled drink is gone. It is not a forgotten luxury. It is an unthinkable one. To wish for a cup of ice in July would be the same as wishing for a piece of the moon. It belongs to the realm of magic and miracles, not engineering. What happened? Where did all that knowledge go? Historians still argue whether the sophisticated techniques of ice harvesting and storage were truly lost to Western Europe, or if the knowledge simply went into hibernation. Perhaps in the monastery library where you spend your days, there is a dusty, unread scroll by a Roman author, a forgotten text that describes in detail how to build a conserva nivis. You might even run your fingers over the Latin words, understanding them, but the context is utterly alien. The blueprint is there, but the world lacks the stability, the resources, and the political will to execute it. It's like finding instructions for building a chariot in a world that has forgotten the wheel. The knowledge is technically present, but functionally, it is lost. There's another, more profound change. The entire way of thinking about the world has shifted. You listen to the local bishop giving a sermon. He thunders against the sins of the fallen Roman Empire, holding it up as a cautionary tale of pride and decadence. He speaks of their gluttony, their vanity, their endless pursuit of unnatural pleasures. And a luxury like flavored snow, if it were remembered at all, would be the perfect example of this sinfulness. In this new, more austere Christian worldview, enduring the hardships of the world, the heat of summer, the cold of winter, is a sign of piety. To suffer patiently is a virtue. To demand a comfort that defies God, as ordained seasons would be seen as a weakness of the soul, a dangerous indulgence of the flesh. The old medical debate about balancing the body's humors has been replaced by a moral imperative to discipline the soul. Luxury is out, asceticism is in. The great chain of command and supply is broken. Your local lord, powerful as he may be in his own small territory, cannot command a team of men to harvest snow from a mountain 100 miles away. The roads are too dangerous. The allegiance of the people in between is not guaranteed. And frankly, he has more pressing concerns like the Viking raiders who sacked the next valley over last year. The world is too fractured, too uncertain for such long-term, large-scale projects. You stand on a hill overlooking the ruins of a Roman villa, its marble columns toppled, its fine mosaics covered in weeds. You know from local legend that there is a strange, deep, stone-lined pit in what was once its garden, a place the village children are afraid of. No one knows what it was for. They call it a demon's well or a treasure hole. They have no idea that it was once a place of wonders, a pit that held the magic of winter all summer long. The physical remnants are there, but the memory, the understanding, is gone. For hundreds of years this will be the reality in Western Europe. The simple, delightful sensation of a cold drink on a hot day, a pleasure that linked the kings of Mesopotamia to the emperors of Rome, has vanished from experience and even from memory. A dark age of frozen treats has begun. The smoky, timbered hall of the Frankish lord, with its lukewarm ale and its sense of profound loss, dissolves into the mists of history. Let's lift our perspective away from the fragmented, fearful landscape of early medieval Europe. We travel east, leaving behind the overgrown Roman roads and crumbling villas. Our journey is a vast one, spanning an entire continent. We drift over the great forests of Germania, the windswept steppes of Central Asia, across the unforgiving sands of the Taklamakan Desert, and over the final, formidable barrier of the high mountains. And as we descend, we arrive in a world that is not experiencing a dark age. We arrive in the heart of a brilliant, vibrant, and supremely confident golden age. You are standing on a wide, tree-lined avenue in Chang'an, the capital of Tang Dynasty China, around the year 800 CE. The contrast with the Europe you just left is almost overwhelming. This is, without question, the greatest city on Earth. 1 million souls live within its vast, grid-like walls. The avenue is thronged with a cosmopolitan crowd, Chinese aristocrats in flowing silk robes, Buddhist monks with shaved heads, Turkic merchants leading camels laden with goods, Persian diplomats, Japanese students. The air hums with a dozen different languages and the scent of spices, incense, and street food. This is not a civilization struggling to remember its past. It is a civilization forging the future. And in this world, the knowledge of preserving ice was never lost. It was never forgotten. In fact, it had been practiced and refined for well over 1,000 years before the Tang dynasty even came to power. Here, it is not a distant memory of a fallen empire. It is a highly organized, respected, and deeply ingrained institution of the current one. You are a junior official in the vast, labyrinthine imperial bureaucracy, and you have been temporarily assigned to the Ministry of Works, which oversees the Imperial Ice Service. This is not some private enterprise run by scrappy merchants. This is a formal branch of the government, run with the same methodical precision as the census or the mint. There are official ranks for the ice masters, detailed records kept on bamboo slips, and a budget allocated by the Emperor's Grand Secretariat. You accompany a superior on an inspection tour. You see the sheer scale of the operation, and it raises a fundamental question. You see massive insulated carts far larger than the ones used in Rome, delivering huge blocks of ice not just to the emperor's private palace, but to the sprawling complex of the imperial kitchens which feed thousands of people daily. You see ice delivered to state storehouses where fish from the Grand Canal and exotic fruits from the south are kept. And so, a debate rages among scholars even today. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of this enormous state-funded enterprise was simply to provide the aristocracy with chilled drinks and other luxuries, or if it played a far more crucial practical role in the logistics of the imperial food supply. preventing spoilage on an industrial scale. The truth is, it was likely both. A tool of practical preservation that was wrapped in the language and ceremony of profound luxury. The winter ice harvest, which you review in the official records, was an immense undertaking. Under the watchful eyes of imperial supervisors, thousands of laborers would venture onto the frozen lakes and rivers near the capital. They would cut vast quantities of ice blocks, measured and graded for quality. The process was defined by order and ritual, a stark contrast to the frantic, desperate harvests of the West. But the most uniquely Chinese aspect of this tradition is not how the ice is stored, but how it is given away. You are privileged to witness the annual ceremony, held in the early days of summer for the opening of the ice houses. It is a grand and solemn event at the imperial palace. Taoist priests make offerings to Xuanming, the spirit of winter and water, thanking him for his frozen gift. The emperor himself presides over the ceremony. Then the first perfect blocks of ice are brought forth, and the emperor begins to bestow them as gifts. This is the ultimate symbol of imperial favor. The emperor calls the names of his highest-ranking generals, his most trusted ministers, the wisest scholars of the great academies. Each one steps forward, bows deeply, and is presented with a block of imperial ice, delivered to his home by liveried servants. You watch as a famous poet, his face beaming with pride, receives his portion. For him, this is more than just relief from the summer heat. It is a public declaration of his worth, a tangible sign that he is in the emperor's good graces. To be on the ice list is to be at the center of power. To be omitted is a devastating and very public snub. The poet will now be socially obligated to write a beautiful verse, thanking His Majesty for the gift of coolness, circulating it among his friends. The ice becomes a political tool, binding the elites to the throne through a shared, exclusive luxury. Later you might see how that ice is used, not just to chill rice wine, but to create exquisite desserts. Cold soups made with chilled yogurt and fruit, delicate pastries called subing served cool, and dishes of shaved ice topped with sweetened bean paste and exotic syrups. The culinary artistry is as sophisticated as the bureaucracy that supplies it. You think back to that Frankish lord in his smoky hall, sipping his warm ale. At this very same moment in history, half a world away, a Chinese scholar is celebrating his political good fortune by chipping a piece of crystal-clear ice into his wine. The story of our human desire for cold is not a single straight line. It is not a story of knowledge lost and then found. It is a story of parallel worlds, of different cultures nurturing the same ancient idea, and shaping it to fit their own unique vision of power, art, and civilization. The image of the Tang court poet, celebrating his gift of imperial ice, is one of sublime, effortless luxury. But that single, perfect block of crystal, melting so elegantly in his wine cup, is the final product of a system as complex and carefully managed as any other branch of the imperial government. The ceremony you witnessed was the public face of the operation. Now you're going to go behind the scenes. You're going to descend into the cold, silent heart of the machine itself, the imperial ice cellar. You follow an official, the master of the imperial ice stores, a man whose serious title reflects the gravity of his responsibilities. You leave the brightly painted pavilions and bustling courtyards of the main palace, walking towards a more secluded area, a place of low, rolling man-made hills. From a distance, they look like ancient burial mounds. But as you get closer, you see that set into the side of the largest mound is a single, immense door, built of thick, dark wood and reinforced with bands of iron. This is not a tomb. This is a bingjiao, an ice house. Its sheer size is the first thing that strikes you. This is no simple pit. It's a colossal structure, mostly subterranean, covered with a thick layer of tamped earth and topped with a heavy thatched roof for insulation. Looking at its immense scale, you can't help but wonder if this is all just for the emperor's chilled melon soup. Historians still argue whether the largest of these imperial ice houses were designed purely for the luxuries of the court, or if they also served a vital strategic purpose, as a sort of national security food reserve, capable of preserving enough meat and grain to sustain the capital's defense garrison through a long siege. Before the heavy bolts are drawn, the ice master pauses. He lights a stick of fragrant sandalwood incense, plants it in the ground before the door, and bows his head, murmuring a short prayer. This is not mere superstition. It is applied philosophy. He explains to you that an ice house is a place of ultimate yin. It is dark, cold, passive, and silent. The world outside, especially on a hot summer day, is a riot of yang, bright, hot, active, and loud. To simply throw open the door is to risk creating a violent imbalance between these cosmic forces. The small ritual is a gesture of respect, an appeal for harmony before disturbing the deep slumber of winter. It's a reminder that you don't just take the cold, you must be a worthy custodian of it. You get the sense that if you were to shout inside, you'd be in a world of trouble, and not just with the boss. With the ceremony complete, two heavily built servants put their shoulders to the door and heave it open. A gust of air, profoundly cold and ancient, rolls out to meet you. It doesn't have the damp, stony smell of a Roman cellar. This air smells of dry earth, of reeds, and of a clean, pure cold that seems to have a texture of its own. You follow the ice master down a long, gently sloping ramp paved with stone, descending deep into the earth. The brilliant sunlight from the entrance quickly fades, and the only light comes from a few paper lanterns carried by the servants. Their glow soft and contained. You emerge into a cavernous, man-made space. The scale is breathtaking. The ceiling is at least 10 meters above your head, supported by a forest of enormous wooden pillars, each made from the trunk of a single, massive tree. The walls are not stone, but rammed earth several feet thick, a material known for its incredible insulating properties. The floor is not bare, but covered in a deep, springy layer of dried reeds and sawdust that crunches softly under your feet. But it's the order, the sheer meticulous organization of the place, that is most impressive. You are not looking at a jumbled pile of snow or a random heap of ice blocks. You are looking at a library of winter. The ice has been cut into perfectly uniform rectangular blocks, and they are stacked in long, neat, symmetrical rows that stretch back into the gloom. There are aisles between the stacks, wide enough for workers to pass through. It's a warehouse managed with the fastidious precision of a Confucian scholar. Tied to the wooden pillars at the end of each row is a small bamboo slip. The ice master holds his lantern up to one. On it, in neat calligraphy, are characters detailing the date of the harvest, the name of the supervising official, and the source, in this case the Black Dragon River Third Harvest. The ice master points out the subtle genius of the design. The thick earthen roof absorbs the sun's heat during the day and radiates it away at night. The deep subterranean placement maintains a constant, stable temperature, and the thick bed of reeds on the floor serves a dual purpose. It insulates the ice from the warmth of the earth below, and it wicks away any meltwater, ensuring the precious blocks never sit in a destructive pool of their own making. You see the specialized team of workers moving in the lantern light. They are dressed in thick, padded cotton jackets, their breath pluming in the cold air. They move with a quiet, deliberate grace, using ropes, pulleys, and long wooden levers to slide a block of ice from a stack onto a wooden sledge. There is no wasted movement, no shouting. They respect the profound yin of this space. As you ascend the ramp back towards the world of the living, the humid, heavy heat of the summer day feels like a physical blow. The great doors boom shut behind you, and the ice master seals them with a strip of paper bearing a calligraphed charm. You have been inside the vault, the treasury where the dynasty's cold is kept. You now understand that the luxury you see in the palace is built upon a hidden foundation of deep reverence, meticulous planning, and brilliant ancient engineering. The great silent doors of the imperial ice cellar boom shut, sealing the vast library of winter back into its earthen vault. But a single, perfect block of ice has been liberated. Its journey is not over. In fact, the most transformative part is about to begin. You follow the servants as they haul the block on a wooden sledge, away from the cold, dark world of preservation, and into the hot, chaotic, and creative heart of the palace, the imperial kitchens. If the ice cellar was a silent temple, the kitchen is a roaring city. It's a sprawling complex of interconnected buildings, a labyrinth of steam, smoke, and sound. The air is thick with 1,000 tantalizing aromas, ginger and garlic sizzling in hot oil, the sweet perfume of roasting ducks, The delicate scent of steaming rice, the fragrance of exotic spices from the furthest reaches of the Silk Road. Hundreds of cooks, each a master of their specific craft, move with the frantic, practiced grace of a great performance. There are the noodle pullers, the dumpling folders, the wok masters, the master carvers who can turn a melon into a dragon. It is one of the most advanced culinary laboratories on the planet. Your destination is a specific corner of this complex, the cold kitchen. Here the air is slightly cooler, the pace a little less frenetic. A chef, an artist of the cold, stands before a heavy wooden table. The block of ice you followed from the cellar is now his canvas. His tools are not the heavy cleavers and choppers of the main kitchen. They are delicate picks, graters, and a formidable-looking tool with a wide, sharp blade, like an oversized plane for wood. He begins with the oldest and most beloved of all iced treats, a tradition stretching back centuries. He takes the heavy shaving tool and draws it firmly across the surface of the ice block. A cascade of fine, feathery ice crystals falls into a beautiful celadon green bowl, piling up like a mound of fresh snow. This is Baobing, the ancestor of every shaved ice dessert you have ever known. The artistry is in the texture, not coarse and crunchy, but light, airy, and ethereal. Now come the toppings. From a series of porcelain pots, the chef adds a spoonful of sweet, earthy red bean paste, a scattering of translucent lychee fruits, and a final drizzle of a fragrant syrup made from osmanthus flowers. You can almost taste it. The instant melting snowiness of the ice, the rich texture of the beans, the sweet burst of the lychee, all tied together by the haunting floral perfume of the syrup. It is a masterpiece of simplicity, but the chefs of the Tang dynasty, fueled by the wealth and curiosity of a golden age, did not stop there. They were relentless innovators. The chef now turns to a second, far more complex preparation. He sets aside the ice block and takes up a bronze bowl containing a thick, creamy white liquid. It is fresh, rich milk from a water buffalo, a prized delicacy. To this he adds a fine rice flour, which will act as a binder and thickener, and a measure of honey or sugar syrup. Then comes the secret ingredient, the one that marks this as a uniquely Tang creation. From a small, lacquered box, he takes a minuscule pinch of a white crystalline substance and stirs it into the milk. It is Borneo camphor, a resin from a jungle tree, treasured for its powerful, penetrating aroma. A modern palate might find the taste medicinal, but to the Tang connoisseur, it added a sophisticated, cooling essence to the dish, a fragrance that was thought to open the senses. It might be the only dessert in history that was also intended to clear your sinuses. Now for the magic. How do you freeze this creamy concoction? The chef places the bronze bowl of the milk mixture inside a much larger wooden bucket. Then his assistants pack the space between the bowl and the bucket with crushed ice from the great block, creating a frozen jacket. There is no salt, no chemical trickery. This is pure, brute force chilling. The chef then begins to stir the mixture in the bronze bowl, scraping the sides as a layer of frozen crystals forms, and folding it back into the liquid center. It is a slow, laborious process that requires constant attention. As you watch this ingenious procedure, you have to wonder about its origins. The traditional Han Chinese diet was not rich in dairy. Milk and yogurt were often seen as the foods of the nomadic barbarians on the northern steppes. So where did this revolutionary idea come from? Historians still argue whether this leap towards a milk-based frozen dessert was a native Chinese innovation, born in the palace kitchens, or if it was a brilliant act of culinary fusion. It's entirely possible that the concept was inspired by the Turkic and Mongol peoples, whose influence was immense in the cosmopolitan Tang court. They had a diet rich in dairy, including kumis, a fermented mare's milk. Perhaps a Tang chef, tasting a chilled dairy drink from the steppes, had the flash of genius to try and freeze it solid. Finally, the chef's work is done. The liquid has transformed into a thick, soft, frozen mass. It is not quite the smooth, airy ice cream we know today. The rice flour would have given it a denser, perhaps slightly pasty texture, but it is unmistakably a frozen, dairy-based, scoopable dessert. He spoons it into a small, delicate porcelain bowl, garnishing it with a single perfect candied kumquat. You have just witnessed a quiet revolution. The journey from a block of ice to flavored shaved ice is a simple one. But the journey from shaved ice to this complex, milk-based confection is a quantum leap. It is the birth of an entirely new category of food. For the first time, ice is not just being used to chill a drink or to be a canvas for toppings. It is being used as a tool to completely transform other ingredients, to create a texture and a temperature that was previously impossible. 1,000 years before ice cream would become a sensation in the West, these anonymous chefs were laying the groundwork, one camphor-scented frozen spoonful at a time. You have just witnessed a culinary miracle in the kitchens of the Tang dynasty, the creation of a complex, frozen, milk-based dessert. This knowledge, this incredible technique, is flourishing in 9th century China. And yet, you know that back in Europe, the memory of even the simplest flavored snow has been utterly erased. A great chasm of ignorance separates the East from the West. So the question is, how did that chasm get crossed? How did the secrets of the cold finally make their way back to Europe? For centuries, the answer to that question has been a simple, romantic, and incredibly famous story. A story with a hero. And his name is Marco Polo. Let's allow the centuries to drift by once more. The glorious Tang dynasty, with its poets and its refined luxuries, has fallen. China has been conquered by a new formidable power from the steppes, the Mongols. It is now the late 13th century, and you are a young man with a keen eye for business and a boundless sense of adventure. You are a merchant from the great trading city of Venice, and you have just completed an impossibly long and arduous journey along the Silk Road with your father and uncle. You have crossed deserts and mountains, faced bandits and disease, and have finally arrived at the court of the most powerful man in the world, Kublai Khan, the grandson of the great Genghis Khan. You are standing in the Khan's summer palace at Xanadu, a place of such legendary opulence it will one day be immortalized in a famous poem. The court is a fascinating mix of Mongol martial tradition and sophisticated Chinese culture. At a great feast, after courses of roasted lamb and fermented mare, ses milk, the beloved kumis of the Mongols, a special dessert is brought forth. It is a descendant of the Tang-era treat you saw being made, a frozen confection of milk sweetened with honey, perhaps flavored with fruit. As a Venetian, you have never seen or tasted anything like it. The cold, the sweetness, the creamy texture, it's a revelation. And the merchant in you immediately recognizes its incredible potential. Now we enter the realm of the great myth. The story, as it has been told for generations, is that you, Marco Polo, were so captivated by this dessert that you devoted yourself to learning its secrets. You bribed the palace chefs, you studied their techniques, and you carefully wrote down the recipes. Then, after 17 years in the Khan's service, when you finally returned to Venice in the year 1295, you brought this revolutionary knowledge back with you. You, Marco Polo, single-handedly reintroduced the concept of ice cream to Europe, sparking a culinary renaissance that would eventually lead to the gelato shops that now line the canals of your home city. It's a perfect story. It's neat, it's heroic, and it gives us a single, identifiable moment when everything changed. The only problem with this perfect story is that it almost certainly isn't true. Let's follow you back to Italy. You have survived wars, imprisonment, and another perilous journey. You are now dictating the story of your incredible adventures to a writer named Rustichello da Pisa. The result is a book that will change the way Europe sees the world, The Travels of Marco Polo. Let's look through its pages. You describe the Khan's paper money, his use of coal for fuel, his vast and efficient postal system. You detail the geography of his empire, the customs of his people, the riches of his cities. But as we scan the text for any mention of the dessert that supposedly changed your life, we find nothing. Not a single word about ice cream. Not a whisper about sorbet. No mention of any frozen treat at all. It is a complete and total blank. This is not the only strange omission from your book. In your detailed account of China, you somehow fail to mention the Great Wall. You never talk about the custom of foot binding which was practiced at the time. You, a man who notices every detail of commerce and custom, never once mention the most common beverage in all of China: tea. How could you possibly miss tea? It's like writing a book about France and forgetting to mention bread or wine. It's these glaring omissions that have led to a long-running scholarly feud. Historians still argue whether your book is a genuine first-hand account of your travels, or if it is an embellished, second-hand compilation of stories you heard from other merchants and travelers you met along the Silk Road. The majority of scholars believe you did go to China, but you were above all a merchant and a storyteller. Your focus was on things that would interest other merchants: trade goods, currency, logistics. A dessert, no matter how delicious, might simply not have registered as important enough to include. Or perhaps you never even encountered it. So where did the myth come from? Food historians have traced it back, and it seems to be a relatively modern invention, likely originating in the 19th or early 20th century. It was the perfect marketing tool for a burgeoning ice cream industry that wanted to give its product a sense of ancient, exotic prestige. The story of Marco Polo and the secret recipe was just too good to check. You stand now, a figure of history, both a genuine, courageous explorer who expanded the horizons of Europe, and an accidental fiction, the hero of a story that never happened. The reintroduction of frozen desserts to Europe was not a single dramatic event. It was a slow, messy, and far more interesting process of gradual cultural diffusion, likely trickling in not from distant China, but from the much closer Arab world, which had preserved and advanced the science of cold while Europe was in its long slumber. The real story lacks a famous hero, but it is a truer picture of how ideas really travel, not in a single suitcase, but on the slow, invisible currents of trade, conquest, and time. Let us leave Marco Polo in the pages of his celebrated, if slightly questionable book. The story of how the knowledge of cold returned to Europe is not a straightforward tale with a single hero. It is a more subtle story of threads of knowledge weaving their way westward from different sources. While Western Europe was slowly reawakening, and the great empires of China were perfecting their ancient traditions, another civilization was in the midst of a golden age of discovery. It was here, in the brilliant scientific heart of the medieval Islamic world, that the next great leap forward would be made, a leap that would change the story of cold forever. We are no longer in a palace, a kitchen, or on a dusty road. You find yourself in a place of quiet, intense intellectual ferment. You are in a scholar's study in 13th century Damascus. The city outside is a vibrant hub of trade and culture, but in here, the focus is on knowledge. The shelves are lined not with imperial edicts, but with scrolls and leather-bound books containing the wisdom of the ancient Greeks, the Persians, the Indians, all translated into Arabic, being studied, debated, and built upon. The air is dry and warm, scented with old paper and the faint, sharp smell of the chemicals and herbs the scholar uses in his work. This scholar, a natural philosopher, is grappling with a problem that has constrained humanity for millennia. He knows, as his ancestors did, how to harvest ice from the mountains of Lebanon. He understands the principles of the Persian yakchal and evaporative cooling, but all these methods depend on nature, on geography, on the seasons. They are all at their heart methods of preservation. He is interested in a more radical, more powerful idea, the concept of creation. Can you make something cold, even freeze water on a hot day with no natural ice to start with? Can you command the cold into existence using science? He rises and takes a clay jar from a high shelf. It is filled with a fine, white, crystalline powder. The Arabic script on the jar's label reads Thalj al-Sin. This translates, intriguingly, as Chinese snow. The substance is saltpeter, what we now call potassium nitrate. The name itself is a clue, a breadcrumb on the trail of history, showing that the substance was known to have come from the East, a product of the Silk Road. In China, this powder was being perfected for a very different, very fiery purpose. It was a key ingredient in gunpowder, used for fireworks and early rockets. It is one of history's beautiful ironies that the same substance one culture was using to create explosions of heat, another was about to use to create pockets of intense cold. You watch as the scholar begins what appears to be a magic trick. He sets a large earthenware bowl on his work table and fills it partway with water that is merely room temperature. He then takes a smaller goblet made of polished metal, fills it with sweetened pomegranate juice, a sharbat, and places it into the center of the larger bowl, so it is surrounded by the water. Then he takes a generous scoop of the Chinese snow and pours it directly into the water of the outer bowl. He begins to stir the water vigorously with a wooden stick. You reach out and touch the side of the earthenware bowl. A shock of cold travels up your arm. It is becoming cold to the touch, unnaturally so. Within moments, a thin layer of frost begins to creep across its surface, a miniature winter blooming in the warm Damascene air. What you are witnessing is a powerful chemical reaction. The saltpeter is dissolving in the water, and this physical process requires energy. It draws that energy in the form of heat from its immediate surroundings. It is literally sucking the warmth out of the water, and through the conductive metal of the goblet, it is sucking the warmth out of the pomegranate juice as well. This is an endothermic reaction, the scientific principle behind a modern instant cold pack. It is alchemy, not of turning lead to gold, but of turning warmth into cold. The scholar continues to stir, ensuring the reaction is distributed evenly. After 10 minutes of this quiet, focused work, he lifts the metal goblet out of the frigid slurry. He tilts it. The pomegranate juice no longer flows. It is frozen solid. He has created a sorbet, not by chilling it with pre-existing ice, but by conjuring the cold out of thin air with a chemical powder. This is a paradigm shift. But how was this incredible property discovered? Was it in a lab like this one? Historians still argue whether the discovery of saltpeter's endothermic magic was a purely scientific pursuit, first deduced and then documented by learned men like the 13th century physician Ibn Abi Usaybiyah, or if it was a trick that was already known in a different world entirely. It's possible this was a trade secret among elite confectioners, or even street magicians who used it to wow crowds, and the scientists were merely the first to observe, explain, and write down the principles behind a trick that was already in practice. Regardless of its origin, the importance of this discovery cannot be overstated. Every single method of cooling we have witnessed on our journey so far has been about capturing and storing natural cold. This is the first time we are seeing cold being manufactured on demand. This discovery untethers the enjoyment of frozen treats from mountains and from winter. All you need is a recipe, water, and a bag of Chinese snow. This is the secret that will eventually find its way into Europe, traveling through the vibrant multicultural worlds of Arab-controlled Sicily and Spain. This is the spark that will ignite the West's own renaissance of cold. The scholar's study with its strange chemicals and its manufactured frost fades from view. The discovery of artificial cold was a whisper that would grow into a roar, but for now, it is a secret known only to a few curious minds. While this new science was being born in the quiet corners of the city, the old ways, the grand traditions of natural ice were still being practiced at the very highest levels of power. In fact, for a great ruler, the ability to command natural mountain snow was still the ultimate, most impressive display of dominion over the land. We step back in time just a little, from the mid-13th century to the late 12th. The scent of chemicals is replaced by the smell of dust, horses, and canvas. You are in a military encampment, but this is no rough-and-ready soldiers' camp. You are a guest in the personal tent of one of the most famous and respected rulers in history, Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known to the West as Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. It is a time of great conflict, a lull in the fighting of the Third Crusade. Yet here, in the Sultan's tent, there is an oasis of calm and refinement. Rich Persian carpets cover the ground, intricate silk hangings shield you from the harsh sun, and the air is cooled by damp cloths hung in the doorways. Saladin himself is the epitome of the warrior scholar. He is a brilliant general and a devout Muslim, but also a patron of poetry and science, a man famous for his immense generosity and a code of chivalry that impressed even his most bitter enemies. As you sit with him, a servant enters, bearing a silver tray with delicate, long-spouted glass ewers and fine cups. He pours you a drink of a deep ruby color. This, he explains, is sharbat, a word that comes from the Persian for a drink. It is the ancestor of our words sorbet, sherbet, and syrup. This is the original article. A refreshing, non-alcoholic drink made from the juice of pomegranates and sweetened with honey. a restorative tonic designed to combat the oppressive heat. The sorbet is cool, cellar cool, but Saladin smiles and gives a slight nod to another servant. This man approaches with a small, beautifully crafted wooden chest, lined with what looks like thick animal felt. He opens the lid, and inside, nestled in a bed of dry straw, is a small, compact block of brilliant white snow. In the middle of this sun-scorched crusader camp, it is an absolute miracle. The servant carefully chips off a few shards of the snow and drops them into your cup. They hiss softly as they hit the liquid, and an immediate, intense cold spreads through the glass. You take a sip. The shock of the cold, followed by the sweet and tangy flavor of the pomegranate, is a moment of pure bliss. This snow began its journey high on the inaccessible peaks of Mount Hermon, the great mountain that straddles the border of modern-day Syria and Lebanon. It was harvested in the winter, packed into deep pits, and then, when the Sultan required it, it was brought down from the mountain and transported here by the unlikeliest of vehicles, a camel caravan. The snow was packed into thick leather or felt bags, loaded onto the backs of camels, creatures perfectly adapted for the desert heat, and transported in steady nocturnal journeys to minimize the sun's impact. The patient, swaying gait of the desert camel was the engine of this luxurious supply chain. As you savor the drink, you think of the famous stories you've heard about your host's chivalry, tales that are told in the camps of his enemies as well as his own. There is one story in particular about his great adversary, King Richard the Lionheart of England. During a brutal siege, Richard was struck down by a terrible fever. When word reached Saladin's camp, the Sultan did not celebrate his enemy's weakness. Instead, he sent a delegation to the Christian camp bearing gifts, fresh peaches and pears to quench the sick king's thirst, and the most precious gift of all, a supply of pure mountain snow to cool his drinks and his fevered brow. It is a beautiful story, a perfect encapsulation of medieval chivalry. But did it actually happen? Historians still argue whether this celebrated event is a literal factual account, or a romantic embellishment created by later chroniclers to elevate the reputations of both great leaders. Whether it is fact or legend, the story itself reveals the deep significance of this luxury. For Saladin, providing iced drinks is not an act of Neronian decadence. It is tied to the sacred duties of hospitality and the pious act of healing. To offer it to you, a guest, is the highest form of welcome. To offer it to a sick enemy is a demonstration of his magnanimity and his secure position as a truly great ruler. It shows his power, certainly, but it is a power tempered by grace. Now, imagine yourself as a crusader knight, perhaps one taken prisoner or sent as an envoy. You have come from the cold, damp castles of England or France, a world where you drink lukewarm wine and have completely forgotten the ancient Roman traditions of ice. You enter the Sultan's tent expecting a barbarian warlord, and you are handed a cup of juice so cold it makes your teeth ache. The culture shock would be profound. This simple, elegant gesture would be more effective than any propaganda, a clear and undeniable statement that the civilization you are fighting is sophisticated, wealthy, and in many ways, far more advanced than your own. The Saracens, it turns out, have a better quality of life even on campaign. It is a formidable psychological weapon. You finish your sorbet, the cold having refreshed not just your body but your entire understanding of the world. The taste of that snow-chilled pomegranate sorbet lingers in your mind, a potent memory of a world far more sophisticated than your own. Now, the crusade is over, and your long journey home is complete. You are that knight, that envoy, that traveler, and you have brought back more than just scars and stories. You have brought back an idea, a taste of a forgotten pleasure that will, ever so slowly, begin to change the palette of a continent. You stand once more in the great hall of your family's castle in Normandy, or your estate in the hills of Tuscany. After years under the brilliant hot sun of the Levant, your homeland feels damp, gray, and permanently chilly. The vibrant colors of the Damascus markets have been replaced by the muted greens and browns of a European forest. The food which you once found hearty and satisfying now seems bland and heavy. You miss the sharp, bright flavors of citrus, the warmth of cinnamon, the sweetness of sugar. And most of all, on the rare hot day of summer, you miss the impossible shock of a cold drink. At the evening meal, surrounded by your family and fellow knights, you tell your tales. You speak of the ferocity of the Saracen warriors, the vastness of their cities, the piety of their sultan, and then you try to describe his hospitality. You try to explain the drink he offered you. It was a juice of pomegranates, you say, but made as cold as the river in January. They look at you with a mixture of disbelief and pity. Your brother claps you on the back and says you must have had a touch of the sun. A drink as cold as winter in the middle of summer? It sounds like a fairy tale, a boastful lie. How would one even accomplish such a feat? The memory of the Roman ice houses has been so thoroughly erased that the very concept now seems like a form of witchcraft. But you are not the only one telling this story. Thousands of crusaders, merchants, and pilgrims are returning to every corner of Europe, and they are all carrying this same, flickering memory. This collective yearning creates the first faint whispers of a demand. In the great port cities that trade with the East, the desire is not just for a taste but for the ingredients themselves. Ships begin to return to Venice and Genoa with a new, fantastically expensive cargo: refined sugar, a substance the Arabs had perfected from sugarcane. They bring back new spices, new fruits, and new words. So where does this reawakening begin? Where does the memory of a cold drink first translate back into a physical reality? Historians still argue whether the cradle of the European frozen dessert renaissance was the island of Sicily, or the powerful maritime republics of northern Italy. Sicily has a strong claim. For over 200 years it was under Arab rule, and even after being reconquered by the Normans, it remained a vibrant melting pot of Arab, Greek, and Norman French culture. The agricultural legacy was still there. Vast groves of lemons and oranges first planted by the Arabs. The memory of their customs was still alive. And looming over the eastern side of the island was Mount Etna, a perfect, year-round source of snow, just as it had been for Nero. Imagine you are in the sun-drenched city of Palermo in Sicily. The architecture around you is a stunning fusion of styles, Norman arches decorated with intricate Arabic mosaics. In the bustling market you hear a vendor selling a sweet, refreshing drink made from lemons and honey. He calls it a sorbetto. The word sounds exotic, foreign, and it is. You are hearing a linguistic fingerprint, a perfect piece of evidence of this cultural transfer. The Italian word sorbetto, which will give us the French sorbet and the English sorbet, is not a rediscovered Latin word. It is a direct borrowing from the Turkish sherbet, which itself came from the Persian sharbat, and the Arabic verb shariba, to drink. The name itself tells you exactly where the idea came from. It is the medieval version of foodies everywhere suddenly starting to use Japanese words for new kinds of food. In these coastal footholds, the first, clumsy attempts at recreating the Saracen marvel begin. A wealthy Norman duke in Sicily, or a powerful doge in Venice, hears these travelers' tales and issues a command. A team is dispatched to the mountains, Etna in the south, the Alps in the north, to bring back snow. In the kitchens they mix it with honey and the juice of the expensive exotic lemons. The result is crude, perhaps, not as delicately balanced as the sharbat you remember from Saladin's tent. But it is cold, it is sweet, and it is a revelation. It is a taste of a more sophisticated world, a symbol of immense wealth and worldliness. The idea begins to spread, but not like wildfire. It moves at a glacial pace. A whispered rumor passed between the royal courts and the mansions of the merchant princes. It is an exclusive, almost mythical secret, a testament to the power of a lord who could afford to send men on a dangerous journey to the mountains, all for a fleeting, sweet, cold sensation. The long, cold winter of Europe's palate is beginning to thaw. The dark age of the frozen treat is ending, not with a sudden flood of knowledge, but with the slow, creeping dawn of a new idea, carried on the sound of a new word: sorbet. The faint, whispered rumors of a Saracen delight called sorbetto, which had been slowly spreading through the port cities of medieval Italy, are about to become a roar. The slow, creeping dawn you witnessed is about to break into the brilliant, dazzling light of a new age. We leave behind the cautious rediscovery of the Middle Ages and plunge headfirst into a world of explosive creativity, fierce competition, and artistic genius. We are going to the epicenter of this new world, 16th century Florence, the heart of the Italian Renaissance. You are walking through the bustling streets of a city that is practically vibrating with energy. The colossal dome of the Florence Cathedral, a miracle of engineering, dominates the skyline. In the workshops and studios that line the narrow streets, artists whose names will echo for eternity, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, are creating their masterpieces. The air is filled with the sound of chisels striking marble, the smell of oil paints and wet plaster, and the ambitious chatter of poets, philosophers, and bankers. This is a city that believes humanity can achieve anything, and it has the money to prove it. And the family holding the purse strings, the ones funding this cultural explosion, are the Medici. They are a dynasty of bankers who have become the undeclared royalty of Florence. Their power is not based on ancient bloodlines, but on unimaginable wealth, and they maintain it through a dazzling and relentless display of patronage. A Medici does not simply have a meal, he hosts a spectacle. A banquet is a tool of statecraft, a meticulously choreographed performance designed to awe rivals and display the boundless sophistication of their court. And in the competitive world of Renaissance Italy, every detail matters. You find yourself as a guest at one such Medici banquet. The evening is a parade of wonders, course after course of dishes that are as much sculpture as they are food. And now, the talk turns to a competition the family is sponsoring. They have issued a public challenge to the citizens of Florence. Create the most singular dish ever seen. The city's finest chefs have submitted their creations. But as the story goes, the winner is not a professional chef at all. He is a humble chicken farmer named Ruggeri. While others presented elaborate sugar castles and pastries, Ruggeri's entry is a simple bowl of what he calls sugared and perfumed ice water. The assembled nobles and artists at the banquet are said to have scoffed at its simplicity. But then, they tasted it. The texture was smoother, the flavor more intense and perfectly balanced than any frozen ice they had ever experienced. It was a masterpiece of flavor and chemistry. According to the legend, Ruggeri won the contest outright and was immediately given a permanent post in the Medici kitchens, his recipe becoming a jealously guarded state secret. The story is almost certainly a romantic myth, but it perfectly captures the spirit of the age. That genius could be found anywhere, and that innovation, even in the kitchen, was the highest virtue. It was basically the finale of the 16th century season of Florence's Got Talent. In the Medici kitchens, you see this new art form being pushed to its absolute limits. Chefs, now elevated to the status of artists, are no longer just making a simple dessert. They are creating theater. They have mastered the Arab technique of using saltpeter mixed with snow, allowing them to achieve temperatures far below freezing, which results in a finer, smoother crystal structure. They are experimenting with a dizzying array of flavors from their vast trade network: Sicilian lemons, bitter oranges, mulberries, pistachios. They are creating elaborate frozen sculptures called trionfi di tavola, or table triumphs. A banquet might conclude with an entire scene from Greek mythology, gods and goddesses, heroes and monsters, all rendered in different flavors and colors of sorbetto. But were these creations all water-based? You see the chefs perfecting these fruit ices, but what about the creamy dairy-based desserts you saw in China? The historical record is tantalizingly vague. Historians still argue whether the first Italian gelatos were an independent European invention, or if the knowledge of freezing milk had also made its way from the East. After Marco Polo's time, the trade routes between Genoa and the Mongol Empire were well traveled. It is entirely possible that the idea of a frozen milk dish traveled along these routes, was whispered from one merchant to another, and was finally perfected and transformed in the creative crucible of a Florentine kitchen. This knowledge was considered cutting-edge technology, and it was guarded with the same ferocity as a military secret. A chef who had mastered the art of making perfect sorbetto was a priceless political asset. The great rival families in city-states, the Medici in Florence, the Este in Ferrara, the Doges of Venice, were in a constant cold war of culinary one-upmanship. Being able to serve a spectacular frozen dessert at the end of a banquet was a clear statement that your court was the most advanced, the most cultured, and the most powerful. You can imagine chefs being poached from rival cities, sworn to secrecy, and probably having to sign the Renaissance equivalent of a non-disclosure agreement. You marvel at how far this simple pleasure has come. The restorative, medicinal sorbet you tasted in Saladin's tent has been utterly transformed. It has been infused with the competitive, artistic, and scientific spirit of the Renaissance. It is no longer just a refreshment. It is an expression of human genius, a secret weapon in the game of power, and a closely guarded treasure waiting for the right royal marriage to finally unleash it upon the rest of Europe. The magnificent sculpted sorbets of the Medici court were a secret weapon in the glittering cultural wars of the Italian Renaissance. But a weapon this powerful, this delightful, cannot remain a secret forever. All it needs is a journey, a catalyst, a moment of political alliance to carry it beyond the mountains. That moment and that journey is about to begin, and it will be led by a 14-year-old girl who is about to become the Queen of France. Her name is Catherine de' Medici. You are part of the vast, opulent procession that is escorting the young Catherine from her home in Florence to the French port of Marseille in the autumn of 1533. This is more than just a wedding party. It is a major geopolitical event. Catherine is to marry Henry, the second son of the King of France. The alliance is meant to bring the immense wealth of the Medici Bank and the political influence of the Pope, Catherine's uncle, into the French orbit. You can feel the tension in the air. The ancient aristocratic court of France looks down on the Medici as jumped-up merchants, and Catherine, a young orphan, knows she must arrive not as a supplicant, but as a cultural force to be reckoned with. To do this, she has emptied the Florentine palaces. Her dowry is immense, but her true assets are the people she brings with her. Her entourage includes ladies-in-waiting, astrologers, accountants, and, most critically, her entire household staff, including the most brilliant chefs, pastry cooks, and confectioners in all of Italy. They are her secret weapon, tasked with demonstrating that Florentine culture is the most sophisticated in the world. And tucked away in this culinary army, so the legend goes, is her greatest strategic asset of all. It is the chicken farmer turned culinary genius you saw win the Medici competition, the great Ruggieri. The story tells that Ruggieri, fiercely loyal to the family that discovered him, was now Catherine's personal glacier, her master of the frozen arts. His recipes and techniques, particularly the secret of creating a perfectly smooth sorbetto, were to be deployed in the French court to maximum effect. He was the 16th century equivalent of a star tech developer moving to a rival company, taking all the trade secrets with him. You arrive at the French court, a world of power and grandeur, but one whose cuisine is still rooted in a heavier medieval tradition. They are masters of the grand roast, the thick spiced sauce, the savory pie. It is a cuisine of substance and display, but it is about to seem old-fashioned. The stage is set for a grand wedding banquet, a culinary showdown between the old French style and the new Italian artistry. The feast is a marathon of eating and drinking. The French chefs present their masterpieces, roasted swans, enormous pastries filled with game birds, all the traditional displays of power. Then, at the very end of the meal, when the guests are groaning with fullness and expecting, perhaps some simple stewed fruit, Catherine gives the signal. Her Italian chefs emerge from the kitchens. They carry silver platters, upon which are creations the French court has never seen. There are sorbets of a dozen different flavors: lemon, raspberry, fig, molded into fantastical shapes, perhaps the fleur-de-lis of France intertwined with the three balls of the Medici coat of arms. The French nobles stare, first in confusion, then in suspicion. What is this cold, brightly colored substance? Is it even edible? Tentatively, they take a spoonful, and in that moment, the culinary landscape of France is changed forever. The shock of the intense, pure cold, the explosion of bright, clean fruit flavor on palates accustomed to heavy, spiced meats. It is a revelation. It is elegant. It is refined. It is modern. In an instant, the 14-year-old merchant's daughter has outmaneuvered them all. She has used a dessert to establish herself and her culture as the new standard of sophistication. But was her arrival really this sudden culinary thunderclap? Was it truly a single wedding feast that changed everything? Historians still argue whether Catherine's influence was the revolutionary spark of legend, or if it was more of an accelerant poured on a fire that was already slowly beginning to burn. France and Italy had been locked in a series of wars and shifting alliances for decades. French armies had marched through Italy, and their nobles had already been exposed to the wonders of the Renaissance. The exchange of ideas was an ongoing process. Catherine's arrival, then, may not have been the first introduction of these concepts, but it was the moment they became undeniably fashionable. With the future queen as their champion, all things Italian, from forks to artichokes to sorbetto, became the absolute height of style. Even with this royal endorsement, the secret of the perfect sorbet does not leak out to the general public. Ruggeri and his fellow Italian chefs guard their techniques jealously. The knowledge of how to use saltpeter to achieve the perfect, smooth freeze remains a closely held secret within the royal kitchens. For the next century, the ability to serve a frozen dessert will be a privilege reserved for the King of France and the highest echelons of his nobility. It is a rare and potent symbol of one's closeness to the pinnacle of power. You watch the French courtiers, their medieval tastes melting away with each spoonful of sorbetto. Catherine de' Medici has made her opening move, and it is a checkmate. The secret of the cold has now crossed the Alps. It has been transplanted from the sun-drenched city-states of Italy into the heart of the most powerful monarchy in Europe, where it will be nurtured, refined, and prepared for its next great leap. The exquisite sorbets served at the French court were a sensation, a mark of ultimate sophistication that left the rest of European nobility both enchanted and deeply envious. For decades, the secret behind their perfect, smooth texture remained a closely guarded treasure, a piece of culinary alchemy known only to a handful of Italian-trained chefs in the royal kitchens. How did they achieve a cold so profound, a texture so fine? The answer was not a rare fruit or a secret chant. The answer was a simple, unassuming white powder, a substance with a strange and almost mystical dual identity. We now enter the world of the 16th century natural philosopher, a place where science and magic are still deeply intertwined. You are in a study that is part laboratory, part library. Before you on a heavy oak table is a small mound of white crystalline powder. It is saltpeter or potassium nitrate. You recall its journey, a callback to the alchemist in Damascus, how it traveled the Silk Road from China, where it was known as Chinese snow and was prized for its role in creating explosive, fiery gunpowder. This is the source of its mystique. You hold this substance in your hand, a powder with a seemingly impossible contradiction at its heart. You know that if you mix it with charcoal and sulfur and touch it with a flame, it erupts in a violent burst of heat and force powerful enough to propel a cannonball. Yet the secret that the Italian chefs have mastered is that if you mix this very same powder with water and snow, it does the exact opposite. It devours heat, creating a biting, supernatural cold. It is an element of paradox, an alchemist's dream, a substance that seems to contain both fire and ice. It's no wonder its properties were guarded so carefully. It felt like wielding a fundamental secret of the universe. Let's perform the trick ourselves. You take a large wooden bucket. Inside it, you place a smaller pot made of pewter, which will be our freezing chamber. Now, you take crushed ice, or snow if you can get it, and pack it tightly into the space between the bucket and the inner pot. If you were to place your fruit syrup or sweetened cream in the pot now, it would certainly get cold. But it would chill slowly, forming large, crunchy ice crystals. It would be a granita, not a smooth sorbet. Now for the magic step. You take a generous handful of the saltpeter and pour it directly onto the ice in the outer bucket. You begin to stir the icy slurry with a wooden paddle. An immediate and dramatic change occurs. The slurry becomes intensely, painfully cold. The outside of the wooden bucket begins to frost over. The saltpeter, as it dissolves, is pulling the energy of heat from everything around it. It makes the ice colder than ice should be, forcing the temperature of the brine down to as low as -20 degrees Celsius. It has transformed your bucket into a high-powered miniature freezer. The pewter pot, containing your sorbet mixture, is now in contact with this super-chilled brine. The liquid inside begins to freeze almost instantly, And because you are stirring it as it freezes, the ice crystals have no time to grow large. They stay microscopic, creating the smooth, creamy, almost velvety texture that was so astonishing to the French court. This is the secret. It's not just about making something cold, it's about making it cold quickly. For a long time, this knowledge was passed from master to apprentice in the secretive kitchens of the nobility. But in the age of the printing press, secrets among the literate are difficult to keep. It is now 1589, and you are in Naples. You have in your hands a copy of a popular new book, Magia Naturalis, or Natural Magic, by a brilliant and eccentric scholar named Giambattista della Porta. And as you read, your eyes go wide. There, printed in clear, unambiguous language for anyone to see, is the entire method. Della Porta describes exactly how to mix saltpeter with snow, to freeze a bottle of wine so solid you can cut it with a knife. The magician has published his secrets. The trick has been revealed to the world. So how did this knowledge truly spread throughout Europe? Was it the chefs, or was it the scholars? Historians still argue whether the publication of the technique in popular science books like Della Porta a.s. was the primary cause of its dissemination, or if these books were simply documenting what was already being spread through more practical, if less public means. It was likely a two-pronged attack on secrecy. On one hand, you had industrial espionage, with wealthy lords constantly trying to bribe away their rivals' best chefs. On the other, you had the slow, steady diffusion of knowledge through the printed word. The spy in the kitchen and the scholar in the study were together, letting the cat out of the bag. With the secret now public, a new age of experimentation begins. Any wealthy household with access to the ingredients, and a literate head cook, can now try their hand at making frozen desserts. The technique is no longer the exclusive property of kings and queens. The science of cold, once an esoteric mystery, is becoming a craft. And this new, widespread understanding is laying the foundation for an explosion of creativity that will take the frozen dessert from a royal novelty to a celebrated fixture of European cuisine. The magician's secret is out. Thanks to the printing press and a healthy dose of culinary espionage, the knowledge of how to create perfectly smooth frozen desserts using saltpeter is slowly spreading across the kitchens of aristocratic Europe. For 100 years, it remains in that exclusive domain, a luxurious hobby for the chefs of the rich and powerful. But a new wind is blowing across the continent. A new class of people, merchants, lawyers, playwrights, and philosophers, is rising in wealth and influence. They are building a new kind of urban culture, and they are hungry for a taste of the good life. The age of the absolute monarch is giving way to the age of the public citizen, and the frozen dessert is about to make its public debut. You are in Paris, in the latter half of the 17th century. The city is buzzing, cementing its reputation as the new cultural and intellectual capital of the Western world. And the heart of this new intellectual life is a new kind of social space, the coffee house. Here, for the price of a cup of the exotic new Turkish drink, you can read the latest news pamphlets, debate politics and art, and rub shoulders with the brightest minds of the age. It is into this world that an ambitious young immigrant from Sicily arrives, a man with a keen sense of opportunity. His name is Francesco Procopio dei Coltelli. Procopio is not a nobleman or a scientist. He is an entrepreneur. He has the deep ingrained Sicilian familiarity with frozen ices, the sorbetto that his homeland had inherited from the Arabs, and he has the up-to-date scientific knowledge of how to perfect them using the saltpeter method. His genius was to take this traditionally aristocratic luxury and place it in the trendy, intellectual setting of a Parisian coffee house. In 1686, he opened his café in a fashionable street right across from the new National Theatre. He called it Le Procope. You push open the door and step inside. This is nothing like the loud, dirty, all-male taverns you are used to. Le Procope is a palace of bourgeois elegance. The light from the street glitters in the massive mirrors that line the walls, making the room feel vast and bright. Crystal chandeliers hang from the high ceilings, and you sit down at a small round table with a cool marble top. The clientele is a mix of actors from the theater, powdered gentlemen discussing politics, and, most revolutionary of all, respectable ladies. This was one of the very first public establishments where women could feel comfortable and welcome. A waiter brings you a menu. The cafe is famous for its exotic hot beverages, coffee, tea, and the newly fashionable hot chocolate. But the real reason for its fame, the thing that has all of Paris talking, is the list of glaces or ices. Procopio offers an astonishing variety, a menu of over 80 flavors of sorbets and ice creams. You can order a sorbet made with lemons from Sicily, with wild strawberries, or with fragrant orange flower water. Or you can try the even more decadent novelty, glace à la crème, a rich, frozen confection made with milk, cream, eggs, and sugar. You order a dish of pistachio cream ice. When it arrives in a delicate porcelain cup, you realize the profound significance of this moment. For thousands of years, the experience you are about to have was reserved for the 1% of the 1%. It was a pleasure so rare it was spoken of in myths. It was a state secret of the Medici, a royal prerogative of the Queen of France. And now you, a person of no noble birth, a simple citizen with a few francs in your pocket, can sit down and enjoy it. The velvet rope of history has been unclipped. This is the moment the frozen dessert has been democratized. But was Procopio truly the first to sell ice cream to the public? Historians still argue whether he was a genuine trailblazer or just the most brilliant and successful marketer of his time. It's possible that for years a number of anonymous Italian immigrants had been selling crude ices from handcarts on the Pont Neuf, the great bridge across the Seine. But if they existed, they are lost to history. Procopio didn't just sell a product, he sold an experience. He wrapped the luxury of ice cream in an atmosphere of elegance, safety, and intellectual chic. He made it not just a treat, but a status symbol for the rising middle class. And what a status it achieved. Le Procope became more than a cafe. It became a legend. It became the unofficial headquarters of the French Enlightenment. A few decades after you sit there, you could return and find the great philosopher Voltaire holding court at his regular table, drinking his 40 cups of coffee a day and debating with the editors of the great encyclopédie. In the century to come, it would host Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, who would discuss the future of their new American republic over sorbets. The course of modern Western democracy was shaped in this room, fueled by caffeine and cooled by ice cream. You savor your pistachio ice. Its journey here to your spoon has been an epic one. It has traveled through millennia, from the palaces of ancient kings, through the laboratories of Arab scientists and the kitchens of Renaissance princes. And now, it has finally arrived in the public square. It has been transformed from a symbol of absolute despotic power to one of accessible urban sophistication. The control of the cold is no longer just in the hands of emperors. It is in the hands of entrepreneurs, and it is a pleasure available to the people. You sit at your marble-top table in Le Procope, the intellectual and social heart of Paris, savoring a taste of the future. This elegant cafe has transformed the frozen dessert from a royal secret into a public commodity, a symbol of urban chic. And in the world of the 17th century, any trend that achieves such status in Paris is destined for one thing: to be copied, adapted and adopted by its greatest rival across the water, England. The whisper of this fashionable new treat is about to cross the English Channel. Our journey takes us to London during the vibrant era of the Restoration. The King, Charles II, is on the throne. This is a monarch who spent years of his youth in exile at the French court, a man who developed a deep appreciation for French fashion, art, and of course, food. He is the perfect conduit for this new culinary craze to make its English debut. The story of ice cream in England begins, as it did in France, as an exclusively royal affair. You are a guest at Windsor Castle in the spring of 1671. A magnificent banquet is being held in honor of the Feast of St. George, a grand display of the restored monarchy's power and prestige. The Great Hall is a cavern of torchlight and tapestry. Course after course of roasted meats, savory pies, and jellies have been served. Finally, a special dessert is brought out for the king's table alone. It is a small, curious dish. The official menu, which survives to this day, records it with a simple, tantalizing description: 1 plate of iced cream. This is one of the very first times this phrase appears in the English language. But what exactly were you being served? Don't picture a smooth, creamy scoop of modern vanilla. Historians still argue whether this early iced cream was a true dairy-based frozen custard made with the latest French techniques, or if the name was more literal. It may have been a dish of rich English clotted cream, sweetened and flavored with expensive spices like mace or fragrant orange flower water, that was then simply packed in ice and saltpeter until it froze into a solid, sliceable block. It was likely denser, richer, and perhaps more crystalline than its Parisian counterpart. Think of it as Ice Cream 1.0, a brilliant but still slightly buggy beta version. For the next few decades, this remains the reality. Iced cream is a rare novelty, a secret of the royal kitchens, and a few of the most fashionable aristocratic houses with French-trained chefs. To serve it is to make a statement that you are cosmopolitan, wealthy, and connected to the very latest trends from the continent. But while the elite were enjoying their exclusive treats indoors, a much stranger and more dramatic force was at work outside, one that would give the public their own unique introduction to the world of cold. The climate itself is changing. You are now living in the depths of what climatologists call the Little Ice Age, a period of brutally cold winters that gripped Europe. The chill is so profound that the great river Thames, the artery of London, begins to freeze solid, not just for a few days, but sometimes for months on end. The ice grows a foot thick, strong enough to support the weight of a horse and carriage. And when this happens, the people of London do not hibernate, they celebrate. You are walking on the frozen surface of the Thames. A great frost fair has sprung up on the ice. It is a wild, chaotic, and magical scene. A temporary city of tents and wooden booths has been erected on the river. An ox is being roasted whole over a roaring fire. There are puppet shows, ice skating, and even a printing press set up on the ice, churning out souvenir cards that read, "Printed on the Thames, 1716. It is a spontaneous, joyous carnival in the heart of winter. And amidst the vendors selling hot gingerbread and mulled wine, you see an enterprising Londoner with a new and curious product. They have a wooden bucket and inside, a pewter pot. Using the same basic salt and ice freezing method, they are churning a crude, simple version of ice cream. This is not the refined, delicate dessert of the king. This is a thick, sweet, and intensely cold treat, sold for a penny a scoop to the bundled-up crowds. There is an incredible novelty to it, the sheer fun of eating something frozen while standing on a frozen river. It's the world's most authentic and most temporary pop-up shop. You stand there in the biting wind and contemplate these two parallel scenes. In a lavishly decorated, fire-warmed hall, a king and his courtiers are delicately eating iced cream as a symbol of their elite continental sophistication. And here, on the raw, frozen river, ordinary citizens are eating their own version as part of a boisterous public festival. The frozen dessert is seeping into English culture from two directions at once, from the top down, as an imported luxury, and from the bottom up as a homegrown winter novelty. This dual introduction is crucial. When the great aristocratic families of England begin building their own grand ice houses in the century to come, they will be catering to a desire that has been planted in the nation's imagination. It will no longer be an entirely alien concept. The English palate is being primed, not just by the tastes of its king, but by the strange and wonderful memory of a treat sold at a fair on a frozen river, a fleeting pleasure born from a unique and magical moment in the city's history. The chaotic, joyous energy of the London Frost Fair, with its vendors and its carnival atmosphere, eventually melts away with the winter ice. The River Thames does not freeze solid every year, and a pleasure as delightful as ice cream could not be left to the whims of a fickle climate. While the public had been given a fleeting taste, the wealthy aristocracy of England now wanted a permanent, reliable supply. They wanted to take the continental sophistication of the King's court and make it a fixture of their own lives. To do this, they would turn to an ancient technology and refine it into a perfect blend of science and landscape art, the Georgian Ice House. You are no longer in the bustling city, but in the rolling, impossibly green countryside of 18th century England. You are walking the grounds of a grand country estate, a magnificent Palladian mansion of pale stone that sits in a landscape of almost unnatural perfection. Every tree, every slope of the hill, Every curve of the lake has been meticulously designed to create a series of perfect views. This is a world of absolute order, wealth, and control, and the greatest symbol of that control is hidden in plain sight. Your host, a wealthy lord, leads you away from the grand house, past the manicured gardens, towards a quiet, shady grove of beech trees near the edge of the lake. He points to a gentle, grassy hillock that you had barely noticed, assuming it was a natural feature of the land. But set into the side of this mound is a small, elegant stone doorway, framed by a classical archway. It looks like the entrance to an ancient Roman tomb or a gateway to a fairy grotto. This is the entrance to the estate's ice house. These structures were not the purely functional, cone-shaped yakchals of Persia or the simple pits of ancient Rome. This was Georgian England, and aesthetics were everything. The ice house was an architectural feature, a status symbol to be artfully integrated into the landscape design. Yours is a simple, classical entrance, but on other estates they were built as romantic, Gothic ruins, with pointed arches and fake crumbling walls. Some were hidden within elaborate, man-made grottos, their entrances encrusted with shells and strange stones. It was the ultimate architectural humblebrag, a way to show off your immense wealth and technological prowess without the ugliness of a functional building spoiling the picturesque view. You approach the heavy, oak door, which is remarkably thick and solid. Your host opens it, and then a second, inner door, creating a small airlock to prevent the warm summer air from rushing in. A flight of steep, damp stone steps leads down into the cool darkness. As you descend, the temperature drops dramatically, and the sounds of the outside world, the birdsong, the rustle of leaves, are replaced by a profound, subterranean silence. You find yourself in a vast, brick-lined chamber shaped like a giant egg or a tapering beehive. The design is the result of centuries of refinement. The curved walls and domed roof provided immense structural strength to resist the pressure of the surrounding earth, while the egg shape was also believed to help the cold air circulate, sinking to the bottom. At the very base of the pit, you can see a small grated hole. This is the drain, the single most critical feature, allowing the meltwater to trickle away into a soak pit, ensuring the main body of ice stayed as dry as possible. In the dead of winter, this entire cavern would have been a scene of intense labor. Estate workers would have gone out onto the frozen lake you just passed, sawing huge blocks of ice from its surface. These would be carted up to the ice house and thrown down into the pit, where other workers would smash the blocks into smaller pieces and ram them down with heavy wooden tampers, adding layers of straw or sawdust as they went. The goal was to create one single solid, densely packed mass of ice, which, protected by the earth and the thick walls, could easily last through the entire summer and well into the following autumn. But what was all this incredible effort for? In the grand kitchens of the main house, you see the two sides of the story. You see a pastry chef, a culinary artist in his own right, carefully chipping shards from a block of ice brought up from the cellar. He is preparing the dessert for tonight's banquet, a fashionable pineapple ice cream, a true marvel given that the pineapple itself, grown in a heated greenhouse on the estate, was a symbol of incredible wealth. But in another part of the kitchen, you see the more practical application. The head cook is placing joints of venison, a whole salmon, and large pans of butter and fresh cream into a lead-lined chest filled with crushed ice. This is the larder, the ancestor of the modern refrigerator. And this leads to a debate. Historians still argue whether these hugely expensive ice houses were built primarily for the glamorous, high-status function of creating frozen desserts and chilling fine wines for parties, or if their more significant, day-to-day role was the preservation of perishable food. The ice cream and chilled drinks were the flashy show ponies that everyone talked about, but the ability to keep meat from spoiling and dairy from turning sour was the quiet workhorse that revolutionized the diet of the great house. You climb back up the stone steps, from the cold, still darkness, into the warm, vibrant afternoon. You now understand that the quiet, grassy mound is the secret engine powering the luxury of the entire estate. To own one was the ultimate statement of power. It meant you had the land, the lake, the legion of servants for the harvest, and the scientific knowledge to construct a perfect, subterranean winter. It was the English aristocracy's refined and discreet answer to the wonders of the ancient world, a masterpiece of engineering, hidden just beneath the surface of a perfect lawn. The elegant grassy mound of the Georgian ice house with its hidden depths of preserved winter represents the pinnacle of a certain kind of old-world power, discreet, landed, and aristocratic. But now we are going to take this symbol of ancient luxury and transplant it across a vast ocean to a new world. It is a place founded on the rejection of European aristocracy, but whose most ambitious citizens are simultaneously desperate to prove that they can be every bit as civilized and sophisticated as the kings and lords they left behind. We sail west. You find yourself standing on the manicured lawn of a grand estate in late 18th century Virginia. The air is thicker, heavier, and more humid than in England. The trees are different, the birdsong is unfamiliar, but the ambition is identical. This is a world built to emulate the English country estate, a testament to order and prosperity in a land still perceived as a wilderness. And the new gentlemen of this new country, men whose names would be written into the very foundations of a new republic, were obsessed with embracing this ideal. Before they were presidents and revolutionaries, men like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were planters, architects, and innovators, deeply connected to the latest trends in European agriculture and design. For them, a state-of-the-art ice house was not just a luxury, it was a necessary component of a modern, self-sufficient gentleman's estate. You are at Mount Vernon, Washington's beloved home overlooking the Potomac River. He leads you on a tour of the grounds, and he points out his ice house with the same pride as his innovative crop rotation system. It's an impressive octagonal structure, built of brick, with a deep, well-insulated pit. He explains how, in the depths of winter, his enslaved workers would go onto the frozen Potomac to harvest hundreds of blocks of ice, which would then be packed into the house to last the sweltering Virginia summer. For Washington, it was a symbol of foresight, planning, and mastery over his environment. Now we travel to Monticello, the hilltop home of Thomas Jefferson. If Washington was the pragmatic engineer, Jefferson was the passionate Epicurean. During his years as the American minister to France, he had fallen head over heels in love with French cuisine. He returned to America not just with political ideas, but with pasta machines, French waffle irons, and a deep, abiding passion for the frozen desserts he had enjoyed in the Parisian cafes. You are in his study, a room filled with books, maps, and scientific instruments. On his desk you see a sheet of paper covered in his neat, precise handwriting. It is a recipe. In 18 detailed steps, it describes how to create a rich, custard-based dessert flavored with a rare and expensive ingredient he had also helped to popularize, the vanilla bean. This is the first known ice cream recipe written by an American. It is a complex, sophisticated process, requiring a specialized French freezing pot called a sorbetière. This isn't a recipe for a simple farmer. This is the work of a dedicated international foodie, a man determined to bring the best of European culture to his new nation. And he does. These men do not keep this pleasure to themselves. You are now a guest at a formal dinner, perhaps in the President's house in Philadelphia under Washington, or in the still unfinished White House under Jefferson. The meal has been a grand affair, designed to impress foreign dignitaries and powerful senators. At the end of the meal, servants bring out the final course. A spectacular, perfectly frozen ice cream, sometimes served inside a warm pastry crust for contrast. The effect on the guests is exactly as intended. It is a powerful statement. It says that this new republic, this upstart nation of farmers, is not a provincial backwater. It is a country with taste, sophistication, and the resources to produce a luxury as fine as any served in the royal courts of London or Paris. It is culinary statecraft. But was this new fashion only being practiced in the halls of power? You travel to the bustling port of New York. The city is a chaotic mix of cultures, a magnet for immigrants seeking new opportunities. And you see an advertisement in a newspaper, placed by a confectioner with an Italian name, announcing that he has ice cream for sale to the public. This raises a familiar question. Historians still argue whether the American love affair with ice cream was a top-down phenomenon, driven by the fashionable tastes of the founding fathers, or a bottom-up trend, imported by immigrant entrepreneurs who brought the cafe culture of Europe with them to the cities. The truth, most likely, is that it was both, a trend that grew in parallel at the highest levels of society and on the streets of the growing cities, with the presidential seal of approval, giving it an unparalleled level of prestige. There is a subtle but important difference in what the ice house represents here. In England, it was a symbol of ancient, inherited land and status. In America, it became a symbol of personal achievement and ingenuity. It was a sign that you had worked hard, tamed your piece of the new world, and could now afford to enjoy the fruits of civilization. It was an edible part of the American dream. You stand on the terrace at Monticello, looking out over the rolling Virginia hills. The ancient human quest for cold, a story that began in the searing heat of Mesopotamia, has found a new home on a new continent. This age-old symbol of imperial power has been adopted and repurposed by the leaders of a radical experiment in democracy. They have embraced the luxury, but they have rebranded it as a testament to the bright, sophisticated future of their bold new nation. The story of cold is ready to begin its American chapter. Thomas Jefferson's handwritten recipe for vanilla ice cream is a perfect snapshot of a moment in time. An age of gentlemanly science, personal passion, and small-scale, domestic luxury. But this is America, a nation on the very brink of an industrial explosion. A country where a good idea is not meant to remain a quaint hobby. It's meant to become a business. The elegant, aristocratic world of the Founding Fathers' ice houses is about to collide with the raw, ambitious, and often brutal world of 19th century commerce. And one man will be the catalyst for that collision. You are in Boston in the very first years of the 1800s. The city is a thriving, hard-nosed port, its fortunes built on trade and shipping. The winters here are famously severe. The freshwater ponds that dot the Massachusetts landscape freeze over with a thick, clear, beautiful ice. To the citizens of Boston, this is mostly an inconvenience, a sign of a long, cold season to be endured. But to one restless young man from a prominent Boston family, these frozen ponds look like fields of diamonds. His name is Frederick Tudor, and he is possessed by an idea so audacious, so utterly mad, that people openly laugh at him in the street. His idea is this: he will harvest the winter ice of New England, a product that is literally free, and ship it to the hottest places on earth, the sugar plantations of the Caribbean, the sweltering colonial outposts of India, and sell it for a fortune. He envisions a world where a planter in Jamaica or a British merchant in Calcutta can enjoy a chilled drink in the middle of a scorching summer day. In 1806, you watch as Tudor puts his grand plan into action. He has purchased a ship, hired a crew, and has just finished loading a cargo of 130 tons of ice, cut from a pond near his family's estate. The ship, the favorite, is bound for the French island of Martinique. The entire enterprise is the subject of intense ridicule in the Boston papers. They mockingly dub him the Ice King. You follow the ship on its journey south, and when it arrives in the tropical port of Fort-de-France, Tudor's grand vision immediately collapses into a humiliating fiasco. The problem is one of simple context. The residents of Martinique, both French colonists and the enslaved population, have no idea what to do with a shipload of frozen water. They have never seen ice in this quantity. They have no ice houses to store it in, no ice boxes to put it in, no culture of chilled drinks. They poke at the strange cold blocks with curiosity, but they don't buy them. Tudor's entire precious cargo sits on the hot, humid docks and, over the course of a few weeks, ignominiously melts into a giant puddle of useless, lukewarm water. His business plan was, quite literally, liquidated. He loses a fortune. A sane person would have abandoned the idea. But Frederick Tudor was not entirely sane. He was obsessive. He returned to Boston, bruised but not broken, and analyzed his failure. He understood a crucial business lesson. You cannot simply sell a product. You must create a market. You must teach the customer why they need the thing you are selling. For years, he experimented and refined every single aspect of his operation. You watch him transform from a dreamer into a ruthless industrialist. He revolutionizes the harvest, inventing a horse-drawn plow with a sharp iron blade that can score the ice into a perfect grid. allowing his workers to cut thousands of identical, easy-to-stack blocks with incredible efficiency. He obsesses over insulation, testing dozens of materials, until he discovers that simple sawdust, a worthless byproduct of the New England timber mills, is a miracle insulator. He begins building his ships with double hulls, packing the space between them with a thick layer of sawdust. And most importantly, he becomes a master of marketing. Before he sends a shipment of ice, he sends an agent to the destination port. The agent's job is to build an ice house before the ship even arrives. Tudor strikes deals with tavern owners, giving them the first block of ice for free, and personally teaching their bartenders how to make the latest American cocktail craze, the mint julep. He gives ice to doctors to use in hospitals to cool fever patients. He creates the demand, and then he arrives with the supply. And after years of debt and near disaster, it begins to work. By the 1830s, his sawdust-insulated ships are making the 16,000-mile, 4-month journey from Boston to Calcutta, arriving with more than 2/3 of their frozen cargo intact. The British officials and wealthy merchants of India, sweltering in the tropical heat, greet the ice ships like saviors. They pay any price for a taste of cold. The Ice King is no longer a joke. Frederick Tudor is now one of the richest men in America. So was he a unique genius or a product of his time? Historians still argue whether Tudor's success was the result of his own incredible persistence and innovation, or if he was simply a very clever man with good timing, capitalizing on the broader forces of the Industrial Revolution, faster ships, more reliable global trade, and the rise of a new global elite. The impact of his vision is staggering. The frozen water trade becomes a massive American industry. All across New England, colossal wooden ice houses, some holding up to 100,000 tons of ice, are built on the shores of freshwater ponds. The winter ice harvest becomes a major source of employment, and the product, pure, clean New England ice, is shipped to every corner of the globe, to Rio de Janeiro, to Sydney, to Hong Kong. You stand on the shore of a frozen pond in Massachusetts, watching Tudor's men work. They move with the geometric precision of a factory assembly line. This is a universe away from the ancient rituals of the past. The quest for cold has been captured by the spirit of American capitalism, transformed into an efficient, profitable global machine. Frederick Tudor didn't invent cold, but he put the world on ice. The wake of Frederick Tudor's ice-laden ships created a new global consciousness of cold. He had proven that a luxury once bound by mountains and seasons could be transformed into a commodity, shipped and sold like cotton or timber. While his ships circled the globe, the industrial methods he pioneered were taken up, scaled, and perfected for the biggest market of all, the American homeland. We now arrive at the final, most glorious moment of the natural ice trade, the last golden sunset before an entirely new kind of cold would dawn. You are no longer in a palace, a president's mansion, or a fashionable Parisian café. You are in the kitchen of a comfortable middle-class home in a quiet suburban street in the America of the 1890s. The Gilded Age is in full swing, and against one wall stands a handsome new piece of furniture, a proud symbol of modern domestic life. It is an icebox. It's a sturdy wooden cabinet, perhaps of oak or ash, lined with insulating zinc, with a compartment at the top for a block of ice and a cool chamber below for food. You hear a rhythmic clomping sound from the street, and a familiar call. It is the Iceman. You watch as he stops his horse-drawn, insulated wagon, swings down, and with a pair of heavy iron tongs, expertly lifts a 50-pound block of glistening clear ice onto his leather-clad shoulder. He carries it into your kitchen, opens the top of the icebox, and slides the block neatly into its compartment. He is a fixture of daily life, the final link in an invisible, continent-spanning chain of cold. He is the friendly face of a massive, ruthless industry. This is the system that Tudor started. Now at its absolute peak, the entire process has been industrialized to a staggering degree. You travel north to the great rivers of Maine and New York. In the winter, you see armies of men, now aided by steam-powered conveyor belts called ice elevators, harvesting millions of tons of ice. They work with the brutal efficiency of a factory, feeding the colossal, multi-story wooden ice houses that line the riverbanks. Structures so vast they are landmarks in their own right. From these storage depots, a dedicated fleet of insulated railroad cars, the ice trains, carries the winter harvest to every city and town in the nation, filling the local ice depots that supply your friendly neighborhood iceman. The competition is ferocious. Ice is no longer just ice, it is a brand. Companies wage advertising wars, boasting of the superior purity and clarity of their product. You read a magazine advertisement that disparages the use of cloudy local pond ice and extols the virtues of pristine, diamond-clear ice harvested from the pure cold waters of the Kennebec River in Maine. It's a fascinating echo of the Roman connoisseurs who debated the quality of snow from different mountains. Ice now has a pedigree. This vast, efficient system has fundamentally changed the way people live. Your icebox means that milk, butter, meat, and leftovers can be kept safely for days instead of hours. The risk of foodborne illness is reduced. The national diet is changing. And the luxury that started our entire story, ice cream, is no longer a rare delicacy. It is an everyday pleasure. Small hand-cranked ice cream makers are in homes across the country. The corner drugstore, with its soda fountain and its scoops of vanilla and chocolate, has become a beloved American institution. But even at its height, this magnificent industrial dinosaur is deeply vulnerable. On the edge of town, a large brewery, tired of its dependence on the fluctuating price of natural ice, has installed a noisy, hissing, and fantastically expensive new machine. It uses compressed ammonia and a steam engine to manufacture its own artificial ice. It is the future. And this new technology is arriving just as the public is beginning to grow anxious about the old one. You read concerned articles in the newspapers. As the country industrializes, the great rivers are becoming polluted with industrial waste and sewage. Doctors begin to link outbreaks of typhoid fever to the consumption of natural ice harvested from these tainted sources. And so, a great debate begins. Historians still argue whether the natural ice trade was ultimately killed by the simple technological superiority of mechanical refrigeration, or if its demise was hastened by this growing crisis of public health and the fear of contaminated ice. You stand now, at the very end of an era. You are witnessing the final perfected form of a human endeavor that has stretched for 4,000 years. From the first desperate attempts to store winter's frost in a Mesopotamian pit, through the engineering genius of Persia, the excesses of Rome, the refined bureaucracy of China, the alchemical magic of the Arab world, the artistic flowering of the Renaissance, and the industrial might of America, the story has always been about a partnership with nature. It has been about capturing, storing, and moving the cold that winter provides. Now that partnership is about to end. The need for winter, for mountains, for frozen rivers, is about to vanish. The quiet, electric hum of the refrigerator is about to replace the rhythmic clop of the iceman's horse, and the entire, magnificent world of natural ice will melt away, becoming nothing more than a memory. And so, the great, creaking industrial machine of the natural ice trade fades into a quiet hum, the gentle, familiar sound of the modern age. The story of that immense 4,000-year struggle, with its armies of laborers, its intrepid runners, and its obsessive kings, has come to a peaceful close. The desperate race against the sun is finally over. Let the images of that long journey drift through your mind now, like soft, melting clouds. Picture the silent, cone-shaped Yakchal, standing alone in the Persian desert night. And let it fade. See the silver bowl of snow, glistening in the lamplight of Nero's golden house. And let it dissolve. Remember the Tang Dynasty poet, watching a single, perfect piece of ice turn his wine to a celestial cold. And let it go. Feel the rocking of Frederick Tudor's ship, carrying its impossible cargo of winter across a tropical sea, and let the waves grow calm and still. All of that effort, all of that ingenuity, all of that human drama was in pursuit of the simple, quiet pleasure of cold, a pleasure that is now so effortlessly at your command. The cool air from your fan, or the silent hum from your kitchen, is the final chapter of that epic story. It is a legacy of peace and comfort. You don't have to climb a mountain. You don't have to race the sun. You don't have to guard any secrets. All you have to do is rest. The struggle is over. The cold is captured. It is safe, and so are you. Let the quiet of this final, easy victory be the sound that carries you now, gently, into a deep and comfortable sleep.